Hey guys, tonight we are going to set sail on a journey back to the Golden Age of Piracy. But I need you to do something for me first. I want you to forget every movie you've ever seen about it. Forget the swashbuckling heroes with witty one-liners and perfectly white teeth. Forget the treasure chests overflowing with gold. And especially, forget the lavish captain's feasts of roasted chickens and overflowing tankards of rum. The reality, my friend, was far less glamorous and far more disgusting. We're going to explore what you would actually be eating on a pirate ship. And let me give you a little spoiler. The cannonballs and cutlasses would be the least of your worries. Your dinner plate was a far more patient and insidious killer. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Your support truly means the world. And while you're at it, you'd love to know where in the world you're listening from tonight. Drop your city and the current time in the comments below. It's always a quiet thrill to see how far these stories travel. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Imagine yourself standing on the docks of Nassau, sometime around the year 1715. The air is thick with the smell of tar, salt, unwashed bodies, and the faint, sweetens our stench of rum seeping from the taverns. This is it. You're leaving the land behind. Maybe you're escaping that. Gridala, or just a life of crushing boredom. You've signed the articles, pledging your allegiance to a captain and crew for a share of whatever prize you can take on the high seas. Freedom and fortune await. That's the promise. Anyway, you watch as the last of the provisions are being loaded onto your new home. A surprisingly cramped and weathered sloop. You see men rolling heavy wooden barrels up the gangplank, others hauling coarse sacks of what looks like giant, dusty crackers. There's no sign of fresh fruit, no crates of vegetables, no pens of live chickens. This should be your first red flag. The fundamental problem, the one that governed every aspect of your life at sea, was the complete and utter lack of refrigeration. This is the core historical fact that Hollywood so conveniently ignores. In the early 18th century, there was no way to keep food fresh for more than a few days. A voyage could last for months, sometimes with no land in sight for weeks on end. Every single food item brought aboard had to be preserved in a way that would, in theory, make it last. The methods were crude: salting, smoking, and drying. This didn't just change the taste. It fundamentally altered the food into something barely recognizable. You're not thinking about that yet, though you're caught up in the excitement. The quartermaster, a man with a face like a sea chart and only one good eye, claps you on the back. He talks of Spanish galleons laden with silver, of French merchant ships full of silks and spices. He doesn't mention the menu. Here's a little tidbit for you. A pirate cruise planning for a voyage was often incredibly optimistic, bordering on reckless. They operated on a high-risk, high-reward model that extended even to their pantry. They would oft unintentionally under-provision the ship with basic foodstuffs. Why? Because they fully expected to capture another vessel within a few weeks. The goal was to seize a ship that was better stocked than their own, resupplying on the fly with someone else's food and water. This meant that if the hunting was bad, or if you were becalmed for too long, a food shortage wasn't a possibility. It was a certainty. Your life depended on the crew's ability to be successful pirates. And quickly, you, a new recruit, are blissfully unaware of this precarious strategy. You assume the men in charge know what they're doing. But even the very process of stocking the ship was a source of contention. Historians still argue about how much of a pirate ship's provisioning was meticulously planned by the quartermaster versus how much was just a chaotic scramble before setting sail. Some pirate codes, like that of the famous Bartholomew Roberts, laid out clear rules for rationing and the fair distribution of supplies, suggesting a highly organized system. Yet other accounts paint a picture of a more desperate free-for-all, where supplies were acquired by any means necessary right before casting off, with little thought to long-term quality. The truth likely lies somewhere in between, varying from crew to crew. As the sun begins to set, the ship finally pulls away from the docks. The sounds of Nassau fade, replaced by the creaking of the ship's timbers and the snap of the sails catching the wind. You take one last look at the dwindling shoreline, the last solid ground you'll stand on for who knows how long. You feel a pang of something, not quite fear, but a dawning awareness of your isolation. You are now adrift on the vast, empty ocean, and your survival for the next several months depends entirely on what's sealed inside those groaning wooden barrels. And trust me, you are not going to like what's inside. The first full day at sea is a lesson in confinement. The initial thrill of adventure quickly gives way to the monotonous reality of your new home. The sloop, which seemed so full of promise at the dock, now feels incredibly small, adrift in an endless expanse of blue. You learn to walk with a rolling gait, your legs constantly adjusting to the pitch and sway of the deck. Every surface is damp with sea spray, and the sun is relentless. There is no privacy. You sleep in a hammock, wedged between a man who snores like a dying walrus and another who mutters in his sleep about a tavern wench named Eleanor, an older sailor. A man named Silas with a hand missing 3 fingers takes it upon himself to show you the ropes, literally and figuratively. He points out the areas you're meant to keep clean, the places you're forbidden to go, and the general layout of your world. This here, he says, gesturing around the main deck, is your parlor, your promenade, and your privy. He points to the head, a simple wooden grate at the very bow of the ship, open to the waves below. Mind your footing, wade, and the wind. Then, he leads you to the heart of the ship's culinary operations. You might be picturing a cozy galley, a small room with a stove and shelves of spices. You would be wrong. Silas points to a large wooden box near the main mast. It's filled with sand and lined with bricks. In the center sits a simple iron grate over a pit for a fire. The hearth, he says, with no hint of irony. This is the ship's entire kitchen. It's not a room. It's a piece of furniture, and a dangerously flammable one at that. In anything more than a moderate swell, a fire is too risky. And in a storm, the first thing the crew does is douse the hearth completely. No fire means no hot food, sometimes for days on end. Presiding over this firebox is the ship's cook. On most pirate vessels, the cook was not a culinary artist. The position was often given to a crew member who had been injured in a previous fight and could no longer handle the strenuous work of sailing or combat. A man with a wooden leg or a mangled arm made a perfect cook. He could still stir a pot. Your cook is a man they call Slushy Pete. He is a stooped figure who lost an eye to a splinter from a cannon blast. His job isn't to make food taste good. His job is to make it edible. Period. This brings us to a weird little perk of his job. The name Slushy often came from the slush fund. When Pete boiled the heavily salted meat, a thick layer of greasy, foul-smelling animal fat would rise to the surface. This was the slush. He would skim it off and collect it in a barrel. It was a vile substance, but it had value. When you made port, the cook could sell this slush to tallow makers, who used it for crafting cheap candles or lubricating grease. This was one of the few ways an officer could earn a little extra silver on the side. It was his greasy, stinking bonus. Silas then jerks his head toward a hatch leading below deck. Time to see the pantry. You climb down a rickety ladder into the ship's hold. The air changes instantly. The fresh, salty breeze of the deck is gone, replaced by a thick, stagnant atmosphere. It's a cocktail of smells. Damp wood, bilge water sloshing somewhere in the darkness below the floorboards, tar, and the faint, unsettling sweet smell of slow decay. It's dark, and your eyes take a moment to adjust. As they do, you see them. Barrels. Dozens and dozens of barrels, tacked tightly together, lashed to the ship's ribs to keep them from rolling. These barrels contain everything. Your water, your rum, your salted meat, and your bread. This is the ship's lifeblood. Silas bangs a fist on one of them. 6 months. He grunts. Supposed to last us 6 months. But you can already see the problem. The hold isn't dry. Water from the bilge sloshes around the bottom barrels. Condensation drips from the ceiling. Nothing is truly safe from the damp. And the damp is the mother of rot. Historians are still piecing together just how provisions were managed below deck. Some evidence from recovered ship logs, particularly from the more organized naval vessels of the time, suggests a surprisingly meticulous system, with barrels marked and rotated to be used in a specific order to minimize spoilage. But many accounts of pirate life, often from captured sailors forced into the trade, describe it total free for all. In these scenarios, there was no system. The barrels were just a pile, and when it came time to get more food, a few men would just go down and pry open whichever one was easiest to get to. This meant the barrels at the back of the hold could sit there for an entire voyage, their contents slowly turning into a biological experiment. The quality of your next meal depended entirely on the luck of the draw. You stayed down there for only a minute, but the smell seems to cling to your clothes. As you climb back up the ladder into the blinding sunlight and fresh air of the deck, you have a new appreciation for your surroundings. The ship may be a cramped, floating prison, but the hold is something worse. It's a ticking clock, a larder full of slow-moving poison. You look out at the horizon, and for the first time, you wonder if you made the right choice. The promise of gold seems very far away, but the promise of what's in those barrels feels terribly, uncomfortably close. The first couple of weeks at sea are what the old hands call the good times. This is the honeymoon period of the voyage, and it's all about the food. The provisions are as fresh as they're ever going to be, which, to be clear, isn't very fresh at all, but compared to what's coming, it's a veritable banquet. For now, you haven't yet breached the barrels of despair. You're still working your way through the last of the fresh supplies brought on board right before you left Nassau. This means you get to enjoy the last of the shore-bought bread. It's not soft and fluffy. It's already stale and hard, but it's recognizable as bread. More importantly, it has yet become a mobile home for an entire ecosystem of insects. You might even have a few withered potatoes or onions left, which Slushy Pete, the one I'd cook, chops up and throws into the daily stew. These small tastes of the land are precious, and you savor every bite. This leads you to your last decent meal before the true hardship begins. One evening, as the sun bleeds across the horizon in shades of orange and purple, Pete announces a special dinner. He has slaughtered the last of the live animals brought aboard. Most pirate ships, if they had the space and foresight, would start a voyage with a few live animals, not a whole farm. Mind you, but maybe a couple of scrawny chickens or a pig kept in a small pen on deck. These creatures had a terrible, short life, but their final contribution was a moment of pure bliss for the crew. You watch as Pete and his helpers roast the meat over the brick hearth. The smell is intoxicating, a rich, savory aroma that cuts through the usual sense of tar and salt. It's a scent of civilization, of home. When it's ready, the meat is carved up and distributed. There are no plates. You get your portion on a thick, square cracker that serves as an edible dish. You tear at it with your fingers and your teeth. It's tough, it's stringy, and it's coated in a layer of salt and smoke. But it is real, fresh meat. For the first time in weeks, the texture isn't mushy or slimy. It's a miracle. To wash it down, you're given an extra ration of beer or wine. Beer was a common provision for the start of a voyage, but it didn't last. The constant motion of the ship and the temperature changes would cause it to go flat and sour very quickly. So, you drink it while you can. This meal is more than just sustenance. It's a ritual. It marks the end of your connection to the land. From this point forward, you are completely reliant on the preserved foods in the hold. And this is where you start to notice the real supplies being broken out for the first time. The crew hauls up a heavy sack and pries open a barrel. The first item to become your daily reality is the ship's biscuit, also known as hardtack. You watch as men take these crackers and break them, or rather, try to break them. These aren't like the crackers you know. They are dense, thick squares of flour, water, and a bit of salt, baked until they are as hard as a piece of lumber. They were designed for durability, not pleasure. The nickname for hardtack among sailors was molar breaker, and you quickly understand why. You can't just bite into it. You risk shattering a tooth. The standard way to eat it is to soak it in whatever liquid you have. Water, beer, or later, a thin stew, until it softens into a slightly more chewable mush. Here's a our little piece of food history for you. Hardtack was made to be so incredibly durable that it was sometimes repurposed. There are accounts of sailors using unitin, solid biscuits, as construction materials for small projects, or even carving them into game pieces like checkers. It was food, yes, but its density and resilience gave it a second life as a general-purpose object. Think about that. Your main source of carbohydrates is so tough you could use it for arts and crafts. Now you turn your attention to the barrels being opened. One contains salted meat, and the other holds water. The meat, for now, looks okay. It's unnaturally pink from the salt cure, and it's packed in a thick layer of rocks salt to draw out all the moisture. The water, drawn from a river in Nassau, is still relatively clear, but the older sailors know better. They look at these provisions not with appetite, but with a weary resignation. They know what time in the sea will do to them. Historians still debate the precise moment a crew would transition from fresh to preserved rations. Was it a gradual process, or was there a distinct day when the captain would declare the good time's over? Some ship's articles suggest a structured approach, where fresh food was strictly rationed to make it last as long as possible. For instance, the captain might decree that the last pig would only be slaughtered after 2 weeks at sea, regardless of how tempting it was. But pirate crews were famously democratic and impatient. Other theories, based on personal journals, suggest it was far more likely a feast and famine situation. The crew would devour all the good food as quickly as possible, enjoying a few days of gluttony before resigning themselves 2 months of misery. This approach, while less disciplined, arguably made more sense from a morale perspective. Have one last great party before the long, slow decline. You finish your piece of roasted pork, chewing slowly to make it last. You lick the grease from your fingers. You look at the slab of hardtack in your other hand. This is the turning point. The feast is over. The land is a distant memory. From tomorrow on, your diet will consist of what came out of those barrels. And as you try to sleep that night, your stomach full for the last time in a long while, you can't shake the feeling that you've just eaten your last truly good meal for the rest of your foreseeable life. You would be correct. The morning after the feast, you wake to a new reality. The pleasant memory of roasted pork is just that. A memory. Your breakfast. And what will be your primary source of calories for the foreseeable future is served. It's the ship's biscuit. Hardtack. Yori handed a couple of these dense, off-white squares. They feel heavy in your hand, more like a paving stone than a foodstuff. You try to take a bite, just as you saw the others do. It's a mistake. The biscuit doesn't yield. It's like biting a rock. A sharp pain shoots through your jaw, and you instinctively pull back. An older sailor next to you chuckles, showing you a gap in his own teeth. Don't fight it. Wait. He rasps. Persuaded, he takes his own biscuit and smacks it sharply against the ship's rail. It doesn't crumble. It breaks into a few large, jagged pieces. This is step 1. The history of this particular food is long and, frankly, unappetizing. Ship's biscuit, in some form or another, has been the staple for sailors, soldiers, and explorers for centuries. The recipe is brutally simple. Flour, water, and maybe a little salt. That's it. There's no yeast to make it rise, no fat to make it tender, no sugar to make it palatable. It was engineered for one purpose and one purpose only: to resist spoilage for as long as humanly possible. The key was to bake it 2, 3, or even 4 times, driving out every last molecule of moisture. A properly baked batch of hardtack could, in theory, last for years. In fact, there are still intact ship's biscuits from the American Civil War and even from the Napoleonic era sitting in museums today, a testament to their incredible durability. You take a chunk of your shattered biscuit and dip it into your morning drink. This is the only way to make it edible. The liquid is a weak, lukewarm concoction that might generously be called coffee, brewed from scorched, ground-up beans. You let the biscuit soak for a minute, watching it slowly absorb the dark liquid. When you finally put it in your mouth, the texture is strange. It's no longer teeth-shattering lie hard, but it has to become soft. Either it's transformed into a dense, gritty paste, like wet sawdust. The taste is bland, a faint hint of stale flour and salt, now masked by the bitterness of the cheap coffee. This is your bread now. This is what you will eat, day in and day out. But how was this stuff actually made? Back on land, in the bakeries that supplied the navies and merchant fleets, the process was more industrial than culinary. Bakers would mix enormous dross of the simple dough, then roll it out into thick sheets. They used special stamps, often made of brass, to dock the dough. That is, to press a pattern of holes into it. These holes weren't for decoration. They helped the biscuit bake evenly and ensured all the moisture could escape from the center. Then, they were baked in hot ovens, left to cool, and baked again. The result was a food product so devoid of water that it gave mold and bacteria almost nothing to work with. This brings us to a weird, and slightly gross, fact about hardtack production. The bakeries that made these biscuits were often teeming with pests. particularly weevils. These little beetles would get into the flour stores, and their eggs would inevitably get mixed into the dough. When the biscuits were baked, the intense heat would kill any live insects, but the microscopic eggs would often survive. Sealed inside their rock-hard fluory tube, they would lie dormant, waiting for the right conditions, waiting for the damp, humid air of a ship's hold. You have no idea that your breakfast is also a ticking time bomb of insect life. For now, you just know that it's hard, tasteless, and unsatisfying. You chew the gritty paste and swallow it down, your stomach accepting the calories without any sense of pleasure. You see other crew members eating their biscuits in the same grim, methodical way. This isn't a meal. It's a refueling process. The academic world still has some unanswered questions about the logistics of hardtack. While we know the recipe and the general process, the exact economics of its supply to pirate vessels is murky. Did pirates simply steal it from captured ships? Or did they have specific, illicit suppliers in ports like Nassau or Port Royal who specialized in outfitting outlaw vessels? The historical record, often focused on the more dramatic aspects of piracy, is surprisingly thin on these mundane but crucial details. Some historians argue that a whole grey market economy existed to supply pirates with everything from cannons to biscuits, operating in the shadows of legitimate trade. Others maintain that pirates were almost entirely dependent on what they could plunder, making their supply of even this most basic foodstuff highly unpredictable. You finish your meal, your jaw aching slightly. You're still hungry, but you've eaten your ration. The bland, tasty taste lingers in your mouth. You look down at the remaining piece of hardtack in your hand. It seems ancient, alien. It's a food designed to deny life. The life of mold, of bacteria, of rot, and in doing so, it seems to deny the very joy of eating. You toss the last piece to a seagull, who swoops down, catches it, and then drops it into the water with an indignant squawk, as if even it knows this isn't proper food. Your journey into the heart of the pirate diet has truly begun, and it starts with a stone. It's been a few weeks now. The initial shock of the hardtack has worn off, replaced by a dull, monotonous acceptance. You've learned the ritual. You smack it, you soak it, you chew the grit, you swallow. It's no longer food, it's fuel. But just when you think you've made peace with your stony rations, a new feature reveals itself. It's what the older sailors grimly refer to as the livestock. Onboarding. You're about to dunk your biscuit into your mug of grog, the daily ration of watered-down rum, when you notice something. The surface of the biscuit isn't uniform. It's riddled with tiny holes. Tunnels, really, that weren't there before. As you look closer, you see a minuscule dark head poke out of one of the holes. Then retreat. It's a weevil. Your biscuit is infested. This is the inevitable second act of the hardtack's life cycle. Remember those dormant eggs baked into the biscuit back on land. The humid, stagnant air in the ship's hold was the perfect incubator. Over the weeks, they hatched tiny larvae, which sailors called weevils or maggots, burrowed their way through the hard biscuit, eating it from the inside out. They are now your constant dining companions. You show your discovery to Silas. The old hand, he just shrugs. Extra protein. Lad, he says with a wry smile. The cook don't even charge you for it. He explains that this is perfectly normal. In fact, finding a biscuit without weevils would be the real surprise. The sailors have a simple classification system. The biscuits infested with live weevils are the good ones, the ones where the weevils are dead, suggesting the biscuit has gone truly bad and moldy. are the ones you have to be wary of. The weevils themselves are the larvae of a type of beetle, often the grain weevil or rice weevil. They are small, pale, and grub-like. While they are visually repulsive, they are technically harmless to eat. They are, as Silas joked, a source of protein, but the psychological barrier is immense. Your brain screams that this is not food. This is contaminated. This is rotten. That your hunger, and the complete lack of any alternative, forces you to reconsider. You are now faced with a choice. The same choice every sailor in this era had to make. Do you try to pick them out? This is a futile endeavor. For everyone you see, there are dozens more hidden inside. Do you throw the biscuit away? That's not an option. This is your ration. Wasting food is one of the most serious offenses on a ship, often punishable by a flogging. So, you have to eat it. This leads to a fascinating and slightly tragic little trick that sailors developed. It's a bit of practical magic to make the inedible edible. They would take the biscuit and tap it firmly on the table. The vibrations would cause the startled larvae to crawl out of their tunnels towards the surface. Then, in a moment of grim efficiency, you could scrape them off into a little pile. But what do you do with the pile? Here's the strange part. A common practice was to collect these weevils and add them to the communal stew pot. That way, they were cooked, disguised, and you didn't have to see what you were eating. It was a form of culinary recycling born of pure necessity. This is also why many sailors, especially pirates who had more freedom in their daily routines, preferred to eat their biscuits in the dark. It's a classic case of out of sight, out of mind. If you eat on a dark deck, under the faint light of the stars, you can't see the wriggling things in your food. You can pretend they aren't there. You can focus on the texture, the familiar, gritty paste, and ignore the soft, squishy additions. It was a psychological survival mechanism. The debate among food historians here is about the extent of the infestation. Was every single biscuit on every single ship crawling with life? The general consensus is yes, to some degree. However, the severity would vary wildly depending on the quality of the initial baking, the conditions of the ship's hold, and how long the voyage had been. Some accounts from well-managed naval ships speak of biscuits remaining relatively clean for the first month or two, but on a pirate ship, where standards were lower and voyages were less predictable, a full-blown infestation was almost a given. The question isn't if you'd be eating bugs, but how many you'd be eating with each bite. You look down at your own weevil-ridden cracker. You can't bring yourself to eat it in the bright light of day. You decide to wait for evening. As dusk settles over the ship, you find a quiet corner on the deck. In the near darkness, you soak the biscuit in your wrong. You don't look at it. You just lift it to your mouth, chew quickly, and swallow. You try to think of it as just part of the biscuit, a slightly different texture. You tell yourself it's just food. But as you lie in your hammock that night, you can't help but feel a phantom crawling sensation. You are consuming something that is, itself, consuming your food. You are part of a grim, floating food chain. The biscuit is your sustenance. The weevil's sustenance is the biscuit. And to survive, you must eat them both. It's a deeply unsettling thought. Another small piece of your civilized self flaking away, lost to the pragmatic brutality of the sea, and the biscuits are just the beginning. The real horror is floating in the meat barrels. You've made a sort of grim peace with the weevils in your biscuit. You've learned to eat in the dark. You thought you were adapting, becoming a seasoned sailor. Then, one day, it's your turn to help Slushy Pete haul up the meat ration from the hold. This is an experience that will recalibrate your entire definition of unpleasant. The two of you pry the heavy lid off one of the massive oak barrels. The first thing that hits you is the smell. It's not the sharp, clean scent of salt. It's a thick, gauzy, overpowering stench of brine that has gone wrong. It's the smell of old meat, steel fat, and a deep, underlying note of rancidity. It's a smell that makes you gag, your eyes watering instantly. Pete, long accustomed to it, just grunts and thrusts the long iron hook into the barrel. He fishes around in the murky, gray-brown liquid and pulls up a dripping, obscene-looking slab of something. You assume it's meat. It's labeled as salt beef or salt pork in the ship's manifest. But what comes out of the barrel bears little resemblance to any meat you've ever seen. This was the pirate's main source of protein. Just like the hardtack, it was a product of preservation. Before the voyage, cheap cuts of beef and pork were chopped into chunks and layered in barrels with massive quantities of rock salt. The salt was a desiccant. It drew out the water from the meat, making it an inhospitable environment for the bacteria that cause rapid decay. In theory, this salt horse, as the sailors called it, could last for years. The reality, however, was far slimy. The piece of meat Pete slaps onto the deck is a sickly color, a sort of purplish gray with streaks of yellowish fat. The surface is coated in a glistening, gelatinous film of slime. This is the slush that gives Pete his nickname and his side hustle, the congealed, salty fat that has rendered out of the meat over weeks in the barrel. The texture is all wrong. It's spongy to the touch, and when Pete moves it, it seems to sag under its own weight. But the worst part is the salt. The meat is so thoroughly impregnated with salt that it's almost crystallized. Before it can be cooked, it has to be desalinated, a process that is as depressing as it sounds. Pete takes the slab and tows it behind the ship on a rope for several hours, letting the ocean water wash some of the salt out. Of course, this means it's also being nibbled on by small fish and soaking in whatever other filth is floating in the sea. After its bath, it's brought back on board and Pete hacks it into smaller pieces to be boiled. Boiling was the only way to cook this stuff. You cald and roast or fry it. It was far too tough and salty. It would be thrown into a large cauldron of water, often the same stinking water from the ship's casks, and boiled for hours. The goal was twofold: to rehydrate the meat and to boil away more of the salt. The process turned the galley into a steamy, foul-smelling quarter of hell. Here's a bizarre detail that speaks to the sheer toughness of this meat. A common sailor's complaint was that the salt beef, even after hours of boiling, would shrink into a dense, hard nugget. There are numerous accounts of sailors taking these shrunken pieces of boiled meat and carving them into things, like buttons or small figurines. They would dry them out in the sun until they were rock hard. Your main source of protein was so tough and durable that, just like the hardtack, it could be used as a craft material. Imagine being so hungry, yet the food you're given is better suited for sculpting than for eating. When the stew is finally ready, you're given your share in a wooden bowl. The meat is gray and stringy, floating in a thin, greasy broth with chunks of softened and weevil-filled hardtack. You take your first bite. The texture is abominable, tough and sinewy, requiring an exhausting amount of chewing. And despite the hours of soaking and boiling, the overwhelming taste is still salt. It's a level of saltiness that burns your tongue. It makes you desperately thirsty, which is a terrible thing to be on a ship where fresh water is more valuable than gold. The academic controversy surrounding the salted meat isn't about whether it was bad. Everyone agrees it was horrible. The debate is about why it was so bad. Was it simply the nature of the preservation technique, or was it a matter of corruption and cost-cutting back on shore? Many historians argue that the suppliers who sold provisions to ships, especially to less discerning customers like pirates, were notoriously corrupt. They would use the cheapest, oldest, and sickest animals, knowing that once the meat was packed in salt, its poor quality would be hidden. They would use the minimum amount of salt required to pass a cursory inspection, saving money but ensuring the meat would go rancid faster. Other scholars suggest that even with the best quality meat and proper salting, the harsh conditions of a long sea voyage, the heat, the damp, the constant motion, made spoilage simply unavoidable. You force down a few more bites of the stringy, salty horror in your bowl, you can feel your body absorbing the calories, but there is no joy, no satisfaction. This is not a meal, it's a punishment. You look at the other men, all chewing with the same grim determination. No one is talking. There is nothing to say. This is the reality of the pirate feast. Not roasted chicken, but boiled, slimy, brutally salty chunks of something that was once meat, fished out of a stinking barrel. You are now rudely initiated. You've had the biscuit, and now you've had the beef. And you're beginning to understand that the real struggle on this ship isn't against the Spanish Navy, but against your own gag reflex. You've endured the solid food, but a human being can't survive on gritty biscuits and salt-burnt meat alone. You need water. On land, it's the most basic substance, something you barely think about. At sea, it is everything. It is life. And like everything else on this ship, it is disgusting. The ship's water supply is stored in the same way as the meat, in large wooden barrels or casks, kept down in the dark, sweltering cold. Before you set sail from Nassau, these casks were filled with the freshest water the crew could find, usually from a local river or spring. For the first few days, maybe even a week, the water is perfectly fine. It's cool, it's refreshing, and it's a welcome relief from the salty air. You get your daily ration, a carefully measured amount handed out by the quartermaster, and you drink it gratefully. But water is not a sterile substance. The river water was already teeming with microscopic life, algae, bacteria, and other organisms, sealed in a dark, warm barrel for weeks on end. It becomes a perfect breeding ground. The transformation is slow at first, then rapid. After a few weeks, you notice the change. The water is no longer clear. It has a faint greenish or brownish tinge. When the quartermaster draws your ration from the cask, you can see tiny specks floating in it. The taste is the next thing to go. It's no longer clean and refreshing. It's flat and stale, with a distinct off flavor, like drinking from a dirty puddle. As more time passes, the situation deteriorates further. The algae inside the casks bloom. The water turns a thick, soupy green. A layer of slimy scum forms on the surface inside the barrel and coats the sides. When you get your ration now, it's visibly thick with green slime. The smell becomes overpowering. It's a swampy, stagnant stench that assaults your nostrils before you even bring the cup to your lips. You have to hold your breath to drink it. This is the water you have to drink to survive. This is what you use to soak your hardtack. This is the base for slushy Pete's grotesque stews. There is no alternative. Every man on board, from the captain down to the newest cabin boy, is drinking the same foul, living water. To combat the taste and smell, sailors developed a simple but effective trick. They would add something with a stronger flavor to mask the foulness. This is one of the primary reasons for the daily rum ration. The strong, sweet, and alcoholic taste of the rum could overpower the swampy taste of the water. This mixture of water and rum was known as grog. Here's a fun little historical tidbit for you. The term grog has a very specific origin. It was named after a British admiral, Edward Vernon, who in 1740 ordered that the sailors' rum ration be diluted with water to cut down on drunkenness. Vernon was nicknamed Old Grog because he famously wore a coat made of Gyr Agram cloth, a coarse fabric of silk and wool. The sailors, unhappy with their watered-down rum, contemptuously named the new drink grog in his honor. Pirates, who were not bound by naval discipline, drank grog not to curb drunkenness, but simply to make their disgusting water palatable. Sometimes, they would also add lime juice if they had it in sugar, creating a primitive cocktail that helped to hide the taste and, unknowingly, fight disease. The water quality was so bad that it was a constant source of anxiety and conflict. The quartermaster guarded the water casks jealously. Stealing water was a crime far more serious than stealing rum or food. A man can survive for weeks without food, but only a few days without water. To be caught stealing water was to be seen as threatening the life of every man on the ship. Historians are still debating the full impact of this contaminated water on the health of sailors. While the visible algae and slime were disgusting, it's the invisible bacteria that were the real danger. It's almost certain that this water was a primary vector for diseases like dysentery and other gastrointestinal ailments that constantly plagued crews. The historical record is full of references to the flux or the bloody flux, a catch-all term for severe, often fatal, diarrhea. However, it's difficult for historians to definitively separate the effects of the bad water from the effects of the bad food and general lack of sanitation. Was it the water, the rancid meat, or something else entirely that caused these outbreaks? The grim reality is that it was likely a perfect storm of all three, a constant assault on the sailors' immune systems. You take your daily ration of the green, slimy water. You try not to look at it too closely. You add your shot of rum, swirl it around, and drink it down as quickly as possible. The rum burns, but it's a welcome sensation because it momentarily erases the taste of the swamp in your cup. You can feel the lukewarm, liquid slosh in your stomach. It quenches your immediate thirst but leaves you with a sense of deep unease. You are drinking something that is alive, and not in a good way. You are consuming an entire ecosystem of algae and bacteria. It's a humbling and horrifying thought. You are a vessel of last resort, a machine for processing decay. You eat the weevils in the biscuit, the slime on the meat, and you drink the scum in the water. Every single thing you consume is a battle, a small act of will against your body's most basic instincts. And the worst part is, you know that this slow poisoning from your own provisions is a silent killer, weakening you day by day. Something has to give, and you soon find out it's your own body. You've accepted your diet of buggy biscuits, salty meat, and swamp water. You eat what you're given. Then you try not to think about it. The man responsible for transforming these wretched ingredients into something vaguely resembling a meal is the ship's cook, Slushy Pete, and his job is less about culinary arts and more about applied chemistry and damage control. The cook's domain, the brick-lined firebox on the main deck, is the social hub of the ship during mealtimes. It's a place of constant, low-grade grumbling. Sailors complain about the toughness of the meat, the number of weevils in the hardtack, the weakness of the grog. Pete, having heard it all 1,000 times, is immune to their complaints. He has one recipe, and he sticks to it. It's a dish known by many names: lobscouse, salmagnudi, or just the stew. But the principle is always the same. Throw everything in a pot and boil it until it's hot. You watch him work one day, a master of his bleak craft. He starts by taking the chunks of salt beef that have been dragging behind the ship. He hacks them into smaller pieces with a cleaver, the blade making a dull thudding sound against the spongy meat. These go into the great iron cauldron with a splash of the green, scummy water from the casks. He then takes several handfuls of hardtack, smashes them into pieces with a mallet, and adds them to the pot. The biscuits serve two purposes. They provide carbohydrates, and more importantly, they act as a thickener. As they boil, they dissolve into a gritty paste, giving the watery broth some semblance of body. Next come the extras. This is where a cook could get creative, depending on what was available. If there were any withered onions or root vegetables left, they went in. He might add a generous dose of black pepper or crushed chilies if the ship's spice stores hadn't been exhausted yet. These strong spices weren't for flavor. They were for camouflage. A powerful peppery kick could mask the taste of rancidity in the meat or the stillness of the water. This brings us to one of the most famous and often misunderstood pirate dishes, salmonudi. On land, salmonudi was a fancy, elaborate salad with layers of different meats, vegetables, eggs, and a rich dressing. On a pirate ship, it was a chaotic, anything-goes feast, usually made only after a successful raid when fresh ingredients were available. A pirate's salmonudi might include chopped turtle meat, pickled herring, mangoes, onions, hard-boiled seabird eggs, and whatever else had been plundered, all marinated in wine and spices. It was a wild, celebratory explosion of flavor. But what Slushy Pete makes every day is the poor man's version, the dregs of the larder boiled into submission. One of the more peculiar ingredients that might find its way into the pot was the slush itself. Remember that greasy, foul-smelling fat that the cook skimmed off the water after boiling the meat, while he saved most of it to sell and port. A little bit was often added back into the stew. It was pure, liquid fat. It added calories, which were vital for men doing hard physical labor, and it gave the stew a slick, greasy mouthfeel that some sailors, after months at sea, came to associate with a rich meal. Pete was essentially selling the byproduct of your food, and then feeding a little of it back to you. It was a very strange, very greasy, circular economy. The historical debate here revolves around the role of the cook. Was the cook just a menial laborer, or was he a respected craftsman in his own right? The evidence is mixed. On one hand, the cook was often an injured man, unable to perform other duties, suggesting it was a low-status job. The quality of the food was universally terrible, which doesn't speak well for the chef. On the other hand, the cook held immense power. He controlled the daily happiness, or lack thereof, of the entire crew. A skilled cook who could make the inedible barely tolerable was a valuable asset. The pirate articles of Bartholomew Roberts, one of the most successful pirates of the Golden Age, specifically mention the cook and his share of the plunder, suggesting he was considered an important member of the crew, on par with other skilled positions like the ship's musician. The truth is, the cook's status slightly depended on his ability to manage the crew's morale through their stomachs. A truly Herculean task given the ingredients he had to work with. You get your bowl of Pete's Daily Special. It's a thick, gray, lumpy porridge. You can see the stringy fibers of the beef, the swollen chunks of what used to be biscuit, and dark specks that you hope are pepper. The smell is hot. That's the best you can say about it. It smells hot and salty. You take a spoonful, The texture is gritty from the dissolved hardtack, and the meat is as tough as ever. That it's warm, and it fills your belly. In a strange way, you start to appreciate Pete's artistry. HES not a chef creating delicious food. HES an alchemist, turning spoiled, separate ingredients into a single, unified substance that will keep you alive for one more day. HES not fighting for flavor. HES fighting against starvation. And in that fight, he uses every trick he knows. Boiling to soften, spices to mask, and fat to add energy. It's a devil's bargain. A culinary truce with decay. And as you scrape the last of the grey mush from your bowl, you find yourself feeling a sliver of gratitude for the one-eyed man by the cauldron. His cooking may be an insult to your tongue, but it's the only thing standing between you and the abyss. The sun has set, casting long shadows across the deck. The ship is a silhouette against a sky dusted with stars. This is the time of day when you eat your main meal, not because it's a traditional dinner time, but because it's a strategic decision. You, along with the rest of the crew, have learned the simple, profound wisdom of dining in the dark. Your eyes have adjusted to the gloom. You can see the shapes of the masts against the night sky, the faint phosphorescent glow of the ship's wake, and the dim yellow light from the single lantern swaying in the captain's quarters. You find your usual spot, leaning against the rail, and wait for your ration of slushy peat stew. When you first came aboard, this practice seemed strange. Why would you stumble around in the dark, trying to eat a hot meal without spilling it? You quickly learned the reason. What you can't see can't disgust you. In the daylight, every flaw in your food is cruelly exposed. You see the gray, stringy texture of the salt beef. You see the unsettling thickness of the water. And most of all, you see the weevils. During the day, eating your hardtack is a conscious act of consuming insects. You see them. You know they are there. And you have to force yourself past the revulsion. But at night, everything is muted. The darkness is a forgiving filter. Yuri handed your bowl of stew. In the faint starlight, it's just a dark, warm mess. You can't distinguish the meat from the biscuit. You can't see the color of the broth. You can't spot any unwanted additions. It's just substance. You lift the spoon to your mouth, and you taste the familiar blast of salt and pepper. You feel the gritty texture, the tough chew of the meat. But because you can't see it, your brain is partially tricked. Your imagination isn't being fed with repulsive images. The act of eating becomes more mechanical, less of a psychological struggle. This practice wasn't just about the weevils and the biscuits. It applied to everything. The salted meat, when examined in bright sunlight, could reveal patches of strange discoloration or a sheen of iridescent slime that hinted at the beginnings of rot. The cheese, a rare luxury that was sometimes available, would often be riddled with cheese mites or develop pregnant blue molds. By eating at night, you spared yourself the detailed inspection. It was a collective, unspoken agreement among the crew to embrace a state of willful ignorance. Here's a small, related detail about life at sea. Your other senses became heightened to compensate, while you cowed and see your food. You became intimately familiar with its smell and feel. Sailors developed a grim expertise in detecting spoilage through non-visual cues. They could tell by the smell if the meat was just its usual rancid self, or if it had crossed the line into truly dangerous territory. They could tell by the way the hardtack felt in their hands, if it was unusually light or crumbly, that it was more weevil than biscuit. Your survival depended not on your sight, but on a more primal, instinctual assessment of your rations. The darkness also served another purpose. It fostered a different kind of social atmosphere. During the day, the work was hard, the sun was hot, and tempers were often short. But at night, with the day's labor done, a calmer mood would settle over the ship. Men would gather in small groups, their voices low. They would share stories, sing sea shanties, or simply sit in companionable silence, looking out at the vast, empty ocean. Eating together in the dark became part of this ritual. It was a shared experience of vulnerability. Every man around you was in the same boat, literally and figuratively. Every man was forcing down the same questionable stew. This shared hardship, this collective act of eating what was barely food, forged a strange and powerful bond. You weren't just crewmates. You were fellow survivors, united by a common diet of despair. The question that historians sometimes ponder is whether this was a conscious, organized strategy or simply an organic behavior that evolved out of necessity. There were no written pirate codes that stated, "Thou shalt eat thy biscuits only after sundown." It was a tradition passed down from older sailors to new recruits, a piece of practical wisdom learned through experience. It falls into a category of social history that is difficult to source from official records, relying instead on mentions in personal diaries and trial testimonies. Some scholars believe there was a key psychological coping mechanism, a small way for sailors to exert some control over their miserable situation. By choosing when and how they faced their food, they maintained a sliver of agency. You finish your stew. The warm, heavy feeling in your stomach, a familiar comfort. You rinse your bowl with a bit of seawater and set it aside. The darkness that hides your food also hides the expressions on the faces of your crewmates. You can't see the grimaces, the weary resignation. You only hear their quiet murmurs, the gentle lapping of the waves against the hull, and the creak of the ship's rigging. In the dark, it's almost possible to forget the filth, the decay, the constant, grinding misery of your diet. It's a temporary truce, a brief respite for your mind while your body does the necessary work of digestion. But you know that the sun will rise tomorrow, and in its unforgiving light, the truth of what you're eating will be revealed all over again. The darkness is a comfort, but it's a fleeting one, and deep within your body, a much more serious problem is beginning to take root, one that no amount of darkness can hide. It's been over a month, maybe two, since you last saw and the days bleed into one another. A monotonous cycle of what shifts, ship maintenance, and bleak meals. You've grown accustomed to the diet in a way you wouldn't have thought possible. The weevils, the slime, the stench, they are all just part of the routine now. But you're starting to feel a new kind of wrongness, a deep, pervasive fatigue that has nothing to do with hard labor. It begins as a profound sense of weariness. You wake up from your hammock feeling as tired as when you went to sleep. Your muscles ache, not with the satisfying burn of a good day's work, but with a dull, heavy soreness. Small tasks, like climbing the rigging or hauling on a rope, feel monumental. A feeling of melancholy, a kind of hopeless depression, settles over you like a damp fog. You feel irritable and short-tempered. You're not alone. You see it in the other men too. The usual rough-and-tumble energy of the crew has been replaced by a sullen lethargy. Tempers flare more easily over minor disputes. The sea shanties that once filled the evening air are sung with less vigor, or not at all. The entire ship seems to be sighing under a collective weight of exhaustion. At first, you blame the monotony, the endless horizon, the psychological toll of being cooped up on this small vessel. But then, other symptoms begin to appear. You notice strange, tiny bruises on your legs and arms. Little pinpricks of darkened skin that you don't remember getting. A small cut on your hand from a frayed rope. One that should have healed in a few days. Continues to fester, refusing to close. Your joints begin to ache. A deep, grinding pain settles into your knees and ankles, making every step a chore. Climbing the ladder from the hold becomes an agonizing journey. You feel old, ancient, your body betraying you in 100 small ways. This is the insidious, quiet arrival of scurvy. Scurvy is a disease caused by a severe deficiency of vitamin C, ascorbic acid. In the 18th century, no one understood the chemistry of vitamins. They knew that long sea voyages produced a horrifying illness, which they called the plague of the sea, but they didn't know precisely why. They had theories, of course, that it was caused by the foul sea air, or by laziness, or by the damp conditions. They were all wrong. The root of the problem is your diet. Your body cannot produce or store vitamin C. You must get it from your food. The main sources of vitamin C are fresh fruits and vegetables. And you haven't seen a piece of fresh fruit or a green vegetable in months. The hardtack, the salted meat, the scummy water, they are all completely devoid of it. Your body's small reserves of vitamin C have been completely exhausted. This is where a little known fact about biology comes into play. One of the primary functions of vitamin C is to synthesize collagen. Collagen is the glue that holds your body together. It's a crucial protein for building and maintaining healthy connective tissues, skin, blood vessels, and bones. Without vitamin C, your body can no longer produce new collagen. It's like a bricklayer running out of mortar. The building starts to fall apart. And that is exactly what is happening to you. The mysterious bruises are tiny hemorrhages. Your capillaries becoming fragile and breaking under the slightest pressure. The cut that won't heal is a sign that your skin can't regenerate itself. The pain in your joints is from bleeding inside your joint capsules. Your body is, quite literally, starting to disintegrate. Historians are still debating how much 18th century sailors truly understood about scurvy as linked to diet, while the official cure, James Linn's famous experiment with citrus fruits, was widely publicized and accepted by the British Navy until the end of the century. There was already a wealth of anecdotal evidence. Sailors had known for a long time that fresh greens, or salad as they called it, could ward off the disease. The Dutch East India Company was already planting gardens at its way stations for this very purpose. The puzzle for historians is why this knowledge was so inconsistently applied, especially among pirate crews. Was it ignorance, or was it that the pirates' chaotic, opportunistic lifestyle simply didn't allow for the kind of long-term planning needed to secure consistent supply of anti-scorbutt ICS? The consensus leans toward the latter. Pirates lived for the short-term prize, not the long-term vegetable garden. You try to hide your symptoms, just as everyone else is. To show weakness on a pirate ship is to risk being seen as a liability. You push through the pain. You ignore the bruises. You pretend you have the same strength as you did a month ago. But the disease is relentless. It doesn't care about your pride. One evening, you're chewing on a piece of salt beef. The same tough, leathery stuff as always. But something is different. You feel a strange looseness in your mouth. You poke a molar with your tongue. It wiggles. A cold dread washes over you. You know, with a terrifying certainty, that this is not just fatigue or a passing illness. This is something far worse. This is the beginning of the end. The plague of the sea has you in its grip, and it's about to get much, much uglier. Your own body has become the enemy, and it is systematically dismantling itself from the inside out. The looseness in your tooth was just the beginning. In the days that follow, the symptom that was once a subtle, private terror becomes an unavoidable, public reality. The scurvy has now focused its attack on your mouth. It starts with your gums. They become swollen and puffy, a dark, purplish red color, and are incredibly tender to the touch. They bleed at the slightest provocation. Simply chewing on a piece of soaked hardtack is enough to make your mouth fill with the coppery taste of blood. The gritty biscuit paste becomes a painful abrasive, rubbing your raw gums until they weep. Soon, the swelling becomes so pronounced that your gums start to grow over your teeth. Like a horrifying, fleshy fungus, they become spongy and necrotic, the tissue literally dying inside your mouth. The smell is unbearable. Your breath, which was already far from fresh, now carries the potent, sweetens our stench of rot. It's a smell you can taste, a constant reminder of the decay happening just inches from your brain. You become self-conscious about talking to your crewmates, keeping your head turned away so they don't have to endure the foul odor. Then, the teeth begin to go. The collagen that holds your teeth in their sockets has dissolved. One by one, they lose their anchor. The wiggling molar is joined by an incisor, then a canine. Soon, your entire jaw feels like a row of loose pegs in a wobbly fence. Eating becomes a nightmare. You can no longer chew. You're reduced to mashing your food with your swollen, bleeding gums, or simply breaking it into small pieces and swallowing it whole, risking choking with every bite. You see the same horror reflected in the faces around you. Men who were once boisterous and loud now speak in hushed, mumbled tones to hide their ravaged mouths. They grin. New sound becomes common on the ship. A man quietly spitting a tooth over the side into the waves, as if disposing of a spent nutshell. There's no ceremony, just a quiet, horrifying acceptance. This dental catastrophe is one of the most well-documented and infamous symptoms of scurvy. The accounts from the period are harrowing. One surgeon, aboard a ship in the mid-18th century, wrote of sailors whose gums were so swollen and putrid that he could cut away chunks of dead flesh with a knife without the patient even feeling it. He described teeth falling out with the gums still attached to the root. But here is a lesser-known and particularly grim detail about scurvy's effect on the mouth. It wasn't just the gums. The disease could also affect the palate, the roof of your mouth. In severe cases, the tissue of the soft palate could become so necrotic and ulcerated that it would essentially rot away, sometimes creating a hole that connected the mouth to the nasal cavity. It was a devastating and terrifying complication. You are now in a state of constant, low-grade pain. Your joints throb, your muscles ache, and your mouth is a source of perpetual misery. Your personality has changed. The exhaustion and pain have stripped away your former self, leaving a core of irritable, desperate survival. You are no longer dreaming of treasure or adventure. Your entire world has shrunk to a singular, all-consuming desire to eat something soft, to taste something fresh. You would commit murder for an orange. You fantasize about the crunch of an apple, the simple, clean taste of a carrot. These are no longer just foods. They are medicine, miracles, a lost paradise that you took for granted. Historians often focus on the physical symptoms of scurvy, but the psychological toll is a subject of ongoing discussion. How did this agonizing, debilitating disease shape the infamous pirate temperament? Some scholars argue that the constant pain, the depression, and the physical degradation caused by scurvy could have contributed to the pirate's notorious reputation for reckless violence and alive for today attitude. When your body is literally falling apart, long-term consequences become meaningless. The promise of a quick, glorious death in battle might seem preferable to the slow, stinking, and dignified decay of scurvy. It's a compelling theory. Though difficult to prove definitively, it suggests that some of the pirate's most fearsome traits may not have been born of pure malice, but of pure agony. One afternoon, while trying to force down your ration of stew, you feel a distinct clink against your spoon. You fish it out of your mouth. It's a tooth. It fell out without you even noticing. Lost in the grey mush, you look at it in the palm of your hand. A small, pathetic piece of bone and enamel. It seems impossible that this was once a part of you. You walk to the side of the ship, your legs unsteady, your joints screaming in protest. You open your hand and let the tooth drop into the churning blue water. It vanishes instantly. You have given a piece of yourself to the sea. You know, with a chilling certainty, that if this voyage doesn't end soon, the rest of your body will follow. The scurvy is no longer just a collection of symptoms. It has become your identity. You are a dying man on a ship of dying men, and the only question left is what part of you will rot away next. You thought losing your teeth was the ultimate betrayal by your own body. You were wrong. Scurvy, in its advanced stages, has a far more ghoulish and surreal trick up its sleeve. It begins to rewrite your past. Physically, years ago, before you ever dreamed of the sea, you broke your leg falling from a tree. It was a clean break. The town doctor said it. It healed perfectly, and for years, you've walked without a limp. The memory of the injury sealed away under a thin white scar on your shin. It's a part of your history, a story you sometimes tell, but the wound itself is long gone. Or so you thought. One morning, you awakened to a deep, throbbing ache in that same leg. It's not the familiar pain of your scurvy-ridden joints, but a sharp, localized agony, centered right where the old break was. You pull up your trouser leg to look. The faint, silvery scar is no longer faint. It's an angry, swollen purple. The skin around it inflamed and hot to the touch. It looks like a fresh injury, as if you'd broken the bone all over again yesterday. Over the next few days, the horror intensifies. The skin along the old scar line begins to thin, then split. The wound that healed a decade ago has reopened itself. It gapes open. The real, festering lesion on your leg, weeping a thin, foul-smelling fluid. It is a wound without a cause. The ghost of an injury returned to haunt your flesh. This is perhaps the most bizarre and terrifying manifestation of advanced scurvy, because your body can no longer produce collagen, the biological glue that holds you together. It can't maintain old repairs. A healed wound is essentially scar tissue, a patch made of collagen. When your body enters a state of collagen bankruptcy, it can no longer afford to maintain these old patches. The scar tissue dissolves, and the original injury reappears, sometimes with frightening precision, as if the body remembers exactly where it was broken. You are not the only one. You see other men on the ship suffering the same affliction. A man who was slashed across the arm in a tavern brawl 5 years ago now has a raw, open cut in the exact same spot. Another, who survived a smallpox infection as a child, finds the old pockmark scars on his face turning into fresh, open sores. The ship is becoming a floating gallery of resurrected wounds, each man's past traumas re-emerging on his skin. This phenomenon was well documented by surgeons of the era, who were both mystified and horrified by it. They described it with a sense of awe, as if witnessing a form of dark magic. And his famous treatise of the scurvy from 1753, Dr. Rife, James Lynn described how old wounds would break out afresh. Another ship's surgeon wrote of a sailor whose fractured bone, which had been perfectly set and healed, spontaneously ray-broke in the same place as the scurvy worsened. Here's an even more obscure and unsettling detail related to this. It was just physical wounds. Some accounts suggest that even old psychological traumas seem to resurface with greater intensity. The deep depression and lethargy caused by the disease could dredge up old griefs and fears, creating a perfect storm of physical and mental anguish. Your body and your mind are both coming apart at the seams. You wrap your reopened leg wound with a dirty rag, but it does no good. There is nothing to heal. Your body has lost the ability to perform its most basic function of self-repair. You are in a state of reverse healing. You are not just failing to get better. You are actively getting worse. Your history literally unwriting itself on your body. The historical debate among medical historians on this topic is not about whether it happened. The evidence is overwhelming, but about the precise biological mechanism. While the collagen deficiency theory is the widely accepted explanation, the exact process by which the body so selectively targets old injury sites is still a subject of some fascination. Is there a cellular memory of the trauma that is reawakened? How does the body know where the old wound was? These questions touch upon the complex relationship between injury, healing, and the body's maintenance systems, a relationship that scurvy so cruelly exposes. You lie in your hammock, the throbbing in your leg a constant, nauseating rhythm. You are a living paradox, a young man trapped in a body that is rapidly decomposing, as if you were aging years in a matter of days. The disease has taken your teeth, your strength, your spirit, and now it is taking your past. It's peeling back the layers of your life, one healed wound at a time, revealing the raw, broken man beneath. The desire for treasure is a distant, laughable memory. The hope of returning home feels like a childish fantasy. Your world has shrunk to the confines of your own decaying flesh. You no longer fear a cannonball or a cutlass. Why would you? A swift end in battle seems like a merciful release compared to this slow, surreal, and deeply personal disintegration. You have learned the ultimate horror of the pirate diet. It doesn't just kill you, it unmakes you first. In this world of pain and decay, there is one substance on the ship that offers a moment's escape. Rum. It's the lifeblood of the pirate mythos, the fuel for every sea shanty and swashbuckling tale. But now, living the reality, you understand that rum's role on this ship has very little to do with celebration and everything to do with medication and self-anesthesia. The daily rum ration is the one moment of the day that everyone looks forward to with a desperate, pathetic eagerness. When the quartermaster brings out the cask, a hush falls over the crew. You watch as he carefully measures out your share. It's not a generous, overflowing tankard like in the stories. It's a small, specific measure, usually about half a pint, of the raw, fiery spirit. The rum of this era was the smooth, aged, spiced concoction you might find today. It was a harsh, brutal liquor, a raw byproduct of the sugar plantations in the Caribbean. It was distilled from molasses, the sticky, dark sludge left over after sugarcane juice was boiled to extract the sugar crystals. This black strap molasses was fermented and then crudely distilled, resulting in a high-proof spirit that was often fiery and full of impurities. The taste is sharp, sweet, and overwhelming, with a powerful alcoholic burn that feels like swallowing fire. You take your ration. Most of it goes into your scummy water to create grog, the mixture that makes the water drinkable. But you save a mouthful of the pure, undiluted spirit, You let it wash over your swollen, bleeding gums for a glorious, agonizing second. The alcohol burns with an intensity that eclipses all other pain. It's a clean, sharp fire that cauterizes the rot in your mouth. And then, a blessed numbness follows. For a few precious minutes, the constant, dull ache in your jaw subsides. This is rum's first job. It's an antiseptic and a local anesthetic for your decaying mouth. Its second job is to numb your mind. As the alcohol hits your bloodstream, the sharp edges of your misery begin to soften. The gnawing anxiety about your health, the depression, the sheer, crushing boredom of the voyage, it all recedes. Just for a little while, the rum blankets your mind in a warm, fuzzy haze. It doesn't solve any of your problems, but it makes them feel farther away. It allows you to endure another day. This is why grog was so important. It wasn't just about making the water taste better by mixing the rum with water. It made the daily ration last longer throughout the day and moderated the drunkenness of the crew. A crew of belligerent drunks was a danger to itself. A crew that was pleasantly, mildly anesthetized was functional. Here's a curious piece of trivia about the provisions. The quality of the rum was often a point of pride and contention. While your food was universally terrible, the rum could vary wildly. Some captains were known for acquiring high-quality rum as a way to keep crew morale high. It was one of the few luxuries available, and a good cask of rum was a valuable prize, sometimes more coveted than gold or silver. A ship's reputation could be built on the quality of its spirits, but rum had a darker, more functional purpose as well, particularly in the context of the ship's surgeon. If you were lucky enough to have one, before any crude form of surgery, like amputating a gangrenous limb or digging a musket ball out of a shoulder, the patient would be given a massive dose of rum. It was the only form of anesthetic available. The goal was to get the man so profoundly drunk that he would pass out, or at least be too insensible to feel the full agony of the saw or the probe. Rum was the difference between a screaming, thrashing patient and one who was mercifully unconscious. It was a surgical tool as essential as the knife itself. The historical debate here centers on the actual level of drunkenness aboard a pirate ship. The popular image is of pirates being constantly inebriated, swinging from the rigging with a bottle in hand. The reality was likely more complicated. While drinking was a central part of the culture, the ship's articles, the pirate code, often had strict rules about drinking. There were prescribed times for the ration to be distributed, and being drunk while on watch duty was a serious offense, often punishable by marooning or flogging. The captain and quartermaster needed a functional crew, not a chaotic mob. So, how do historians reconcile the image of the drunken pirate with the need for discipline? The most likely answer is that pirates, like many sailors of the era, lived in a state of perpetual, low-level intoxication, the groggy state, punctuated by bouts of heavy, celebratory drinking after a successful raid or when they made port. It was a managed, functional alcoholism, a tool for survival rather than a constant party. You finish your grog, the last drops of the precious, mind-numbing liquid. The brief respite is already starting to fade. The familiar ache returns to your joints. The foul taste re-emerges in your mouth. The rum doesn't cure anything. It's a bandage on a gaping wound. It's a lie you tell yourself every day to keep going. But in this hopeless world, a good lie is sometimes the only thing you have. It's a borrowed moment of peace, paid for with the fire in your throat and the haze in your mind. And as the effect wears off, you're left alone again with the stark, sober reality of your decaying body. The temporary relief only serves to highlight the permanence of your pain. You've been at sea for so long that the memory of land feels like a dream. Your world has shrunk to the creaking timbers of the ship and the vast, empty expanse of the ocean. Scurvy has taken its toll on everyone. The crew is a ghost of its former self, a collection of limping, aching men held together by rum and sheer stubbornness. The mood on the ship is bleak, a quiet, simmering despair. Then, one morning, everything changes. The lookout in the crow's nest lets out a cry. Sail ho! The words are like an electric shock. The lethargy that has gripped the crew for weeks evaporates in an instant. Men who could barely climb out of their hammocks are now scrambling for position, their eyes straining at the horizon. You pull yourself up, your joints screaming in protest, and squint at the distant speck. It's a merchant ship, low and heavy in the water, plodding along its straight route. And a merchant ship means one thing above all else: fresh food. The captain issues his orders, his voice sharp and clear for the first time in weeks. The chase is on. The ship comes alive. Sails are unfurled. Ropes are tightened. The pirates, who moments ago were dying men, are now transformed into predators. The hunt invigorates them, giving them a purpose beyond their own suffering. The prospect of a full belly and fresh water is a more powerful medicine than any rum. The chase lasts for hours. Your sloop is faster and more nimble, and you slowly gain on the lumbering merchantman. As you draw closer, you can see the details. It's a Spanish vessel, likely sailing from the colonies back to Europe. Its cargo hold would be filled with sugar, tobacco, maybe some silver. But you and your crewmates are not thinking about that. You're thinking about the captain's pantry. You're fantasizing about the ship's water casks, filled recently in a port. You are, for all intents and purposes, a pack of starving wolves chasing a sheep. When the first cannon shot is fired across the merchantman's bow, the adrenaline is a fire in your veins, burning away the pain and fatigue. The Spanish ship, hopelessly outgunned and outmaneuvered, offers only token resistance before striking its colors, lowering its flag in surrender. The moment you board the captured vessel is one of pure, unrestrained chaos. The Spanish crew, terrified, is quickly rounded up. There's no thought of treasure chests or bags of silver yet. The first priority is the larder. The crew swarms below decks, led by a primal, desperate hunger. You follow them, stumbling into the ship's galleon storage holds. And then you see it. It's a sight so beautiful, so miraculous, that it brings tears to your eyes. There are crates of oranges and lemons. There are bright colors like jewels in the dim light. There are sacks of potatoes and yams. There are strings of onions and garlic hanging from the beams. There's a small pan with live chickens, clucking in alarm. There is a barrel of wine that has turned to vinegar, and a cask of water that is cool and clear. This is the pirate's jackpot. Not gold, but life. A strange but common pirate practice comes into play here. While the valuables, the silver, the cargo, the navigational instruments, would be carefully logged and set aside to be divided later according to the ship's articles, the food and drink were often declared a free-for-all. There was an immediate, communal reward for the entire crew. This was a critical custom for maintaining morale. The promise of an equal share of the hard currency was the foundation of the pirate contract. But the immediate, joyful plunder of the pantry was the grease that kept the gears of the pirate machine turning. Men are grabbing fruit and stuffing it into their mouths, juice running down their chines. They are tearing at loaves of bread that are only a few days stale. Someone has already slaughtered a chicken, its feathers still flying, The air is filled with shouts of pure, unadulterated joy. It's a scene of gluttony, but you understand it completely. It's not just hunger. It's a desperate act of self-preservation. Every bite of a vitamin-rich orange is a blow against the scurvy that is killing you. The historical accuracy of these feasting scenes is a point of interest for scholars. While Hollywood exaggerates them into lavish banquets, the core truth is that the capture of a well-stocked ship was a moment of profound, almost religious, relief. The accounts of captured merchants often describe the pirates' ravenous attack on the food stores as the first order of business. The question that remains debated is how this newfound bounty was managed. Was it truly a complete free-for-all, consumed in a matter of days? Or did a wise quartermaster step in to ration the fresh supplies to make them last as long as possible? Given the pirates' democratic, but often short-sighted nature, it's likely that most crews opted for a few days of glorious feasting over weeks of careful rationing. You find a crate of limes. You grab one, slice it open with your knife, and suck on it. The soreness is so intense it makes your whole body shudder. A shocking, electrifying sensation on your ruined palate. It hurts your bleeding gums, but it's a good hurt, a clean hurt. It's the taste of life, of medicine, of hope. You can almost feel the vitamin C coursing through your veins, beginning the slow, arduous process of rebuilding your dissolving body. For the first time in months, you feel a flicker of something you thought you had lost forever. A future. The capture of this ship has just given you food for today. It has given you a chance to see tomorrow. The fight against your own provisions is, for now, over. You have won. And tonight, for the first time in an eternity, you will feast like a king. The night after the capture is a blur of joyous, frantic consumption. The deck of your pirate sloop, usually a place of grim routine, is transformed into a chaotic banquet hall. The spoils from the Spanish merchant ship are piled in the center of the deck. Mounds of citrus fruits, casks of wine, sacks of real flour, and the freshly slaughtered chickens and a pig that were part of the captured ship's livestock. Slushy Pete, for the first time, has ingredients worthy of his cauldron. He is a man reborn. He roasts the fresh meat over a roaring fire in his hearth, the smell driving the crew into a state of near frenzy. The scent of cooking pork, rich and savory, is a perfume of the gods after months of smelling only salt beef and bilge water. There are no plates, no cutlery, no etiquette. This is not a meal. It is an exorcism. You are driving out the demons of starvation and scurvy. You grab a chunk of roasted pork with your bare hands, the hot grease dripping down your arms. It's tender. You can actually chew it, even with your loose teeth and swollen gums. The flavor is a revelation, a symphony of taste in a world that had been reduced to the single, punishing note of salt. You gorge yourself. You eat until your stomach aches. Then you eat some more. You drink deeply from a cask of Spanish wine, a smooth, rich reed that is a world away from your fiery raw rum. The wine is cool and clean in your throat. You alternate between bites of meat and sips of wine, a delirious rhythm of pleasure. Then you turn to the fruits, the oranges, lemons, and limes are passed around like solid gold. You devour them, peel and all, not wanting to waste a single shred of the precious, life-giving pulp. The intense, acidic juice is a shock to your system, a vibrant explosion of flavor. It's the opposite of everything you've eaten for months. It's not dead, preserved, and salted. It is alive, fresh, and bursting with energy. This scene of immediate, unrestrained gluttony is a hallmark of the pirate life. They existed in a constant state of feast or famine. There was no middle ground. Life was either desperate, grinding hardship, or it was wild, excessive celebration. This boom and bust cycle defined their entire existence. From their diet to their finances, they would endure months of poverty and misery for the chance at a few weeks of living like emperors. But here's a little-known medical fact about this situation. This sudden, massive influx of rich food and vitamin C could be a shock to a body ravaged by scurvy and starvation, while the vitamin C would immediately begin to halt the progress of the disease and start the healing process. The sudden load of fats and sugars on a digestive system accustomed to a minimal, poor quality diet could cause its own problems. Many of the men, yourself included, will likely suffer from severe stomach cramps and digestive distress in the coming days. It's the painful paradox of refining a starved body. The very thing that saves you also punishes you. You see men laughing, truly laughing, for the first time in months. They are drunk on wine and full bellies. They sing loud, boisterous songs, their voices stronger than they have been in ages. The physical transformation is almost instantaneous. The deep lethargy has been replaced by a manic, joyful energy. The cloud of depression has lifted, burned away by the sunshine of a full stomach. The historical debate here concerns the speed of recovery from scurvy. How quickly did sailors bounce back after receiving fresh provisions? The accounts are remarkable. Dr. If. Lind and others noted that the effects of fresh citrus could be seen in a matter of days. The bleeding gums would begin to firm up, the skin would start to heal, and the terrible lethargy would lift with almost miraculous speed. The deeper wounds, like the reopened scars and aching joints, would take longer, but the immediate, life-threatening symptoms could be arrested very quickly. This rapid recovery is why a single captured ship could mean the difference between an entire crew perishing and that same crew being ready for another fight within a week. As the night wears on, the feasting slows, replaced by a contented, food-drunk stupor. You lie on the deck, your belly full to bursting, an orange held loosely in your hand. The pain in your joints seems to have dulled. The bleeding in your gums has lessened. It might be your imagination, fueled by wine and hope, but you feel better. You feel the slow, welcome tide of healing beginning its work. This feast is a temporary reprieve. You know that. The fresh food will run out in a few days. The wine will be drunk, and soon you will be back to the hardtack and the salt horse. But for now, none of that matters. Tonight, you are not a starving wretch on a floating prison. You are a conqueror. You are a king. You have met the enemy, the endless, hungry sea, and you have ripped a moment of pure, vibrant life from its clutches. You fall asleep on the deck, under the stars, with the sweet taste of orange still lingering on your tongue, a taste that you now know is the taste of salvation. The glorious feast from the Spanish merchant ship is now a fond memory. The fresh fruit is gone, the wine casks are empty, and the last of the fresh meat has been eaten. Within a week, you are right back where you started, staring into a bowl of grace to made from salt beef and weevily biscuits. The scurvy, which had begun a miraculous retreat, slowly starts to creep back, a shadow at the edge of your vision. The brief, golden period of health and plenty makes the return to the old diet even more depressing. But the memory of fresh meat has reawakened a primal instinct in the crew. You are no longer content to survive solely on the foul contents of the barrels. Your eyes are now constantly scanning the world around you for any opportunity, any small morsel of living protein. The sea and the sky are no longer just an empty backdrop. They are a potential hunting ground. This is when you learn about the other sources of fresh food that sustain pirates between captures. The animals you could catch at sea. One of the most important of these was the sea turtle. In the warm waters of the Caribbean, giant sea turtles were plentiful. They were slow, easy to catch, and, most importantly, they were a walking pantry. When the ship was low on supplies and becalmed in turtle-rich waters, the captain would send out a longboat with a small crew. Their mission: to hunt for turtles. You watch the process one afternoon. The men in the longboat spot a large green sea turtle floating on the surface, basking in the sun. They row quietly, approaching it from behind. Then, with a sudden burst of speed, they are upon it. One of the men, a strong swimmer, dives into the water and manages to flip the turtle onto its back. In this position, it is helpless. They hold a massive, struggling creature, which can weigh hundreds of pounds. Back to the ship. Once on deck, the turtle is a source of immense excitement. It represents a significant amount of fresh meat. The butchering process is a grim but efficient affair. The meat is carved up, and Slushy Pete immediately puts it to use. Turtle meat was highly prized by sailors. It was said to have several different flavors, depending on the part of the animal, tasting variously like beef, chicken, or veal. The turtle's fat could be rendered down to make a clean burning oil, and its liver was considered a delicacy. Best of all, a large turtle could feed the entire crew for a couple of days. A fascinating and slightly strange fact about turtle hunting is the way they were stored. If a crew was lucky enough to catch several turtles, they wouldn't slaughter them all at once. They would keep the turtles alive on the ship, lying on their backs on the deck. In this helpless position, a turtle can survive for weeks without food or water. The ship became a mobile larder of live, self-preserving meat. It was a cruel fate for the turtles, but for the sailors, it was a vital survival strategy. Besides turtles, the crew also hunted seabirds. Gulls, albatrosses, and other birds would often follow the ship for days, hoping for scraps. For the crew, these birds were a tempting target. They could be caught with baited lines trailed behind the ship, or sometimes, if they landed on the rigging, they could be snatched by a quick-moving sailor. The birds were small and didn't offer much meat, but they were a welcome change. They were usually roasted, feathers and all, over the fire, a process that created a terrible smell of burning plumage but resulted in a small, hot, greasy bite of fresh protein. The eggs were even more valuable than the birds themselves. If the ship passed close to a small, rocky island, a bird rookery, the captain would often send a boat ashore. The men would return with their hats and shirts full of eggs. These were a precious commodity. They could be boiled, fried, or mixed into the stew, adding a richness and flavor that was sorely missed. The historical debate surrounding this kind of foraging centers on its reliability. How much could a crew really depend on hunting turtles and birds to supplement their diet? Some romantic accounts of piracy portray them as master hunters, constantly living off the bounty of the sea. However, most historians argue that this was a highly opportunistic and unreliable source of food. Turtle migrations are seasonal, and finding them in the open ocean was a matter of pure luck. Catching birds was difficult and yielded little reward, while these hunts provided crucial, morale-boosting infusions of fresh food. They could not be relied upon as a primary food source. They were a bonus, a lucky break, not a strategy. The grim reality was that for the vast majority of the time, the crew's survival depended on the rotting contents of the barrels below deck. You chew on a tough, sinewy piece of boiled turtle meat. It's not the delicious pork from the Spanish ship. but it's 1,000 times better than the salt horse. It's fresh. It's real. It reminds your body what real food tastes like. It's a small victory, a temporary reprieve in the long, grinding war against your provisions. As you eat, you look up at the sky, watching the gulls circle overhead. You no longer see them as symbols of the sea's freedom. You see them as potential dinners. Your perspective has changed. You are no longer just a sailor. You are a hunter, forever scanning your environment for the next meal, the next small miracle to keep you alive. The turtle meat is a distant memory, and the seabirds have learned to keep their distance. The familiar lethargy of scurvy is settling back in, a heavy blankets mothering the crew's spirit. The mood is turning sour. Fights are breaking out over trivial matters. The ship needs more than just a lucky turtle. It needs land. One hazy morning, the lookout's cry of land ho sends a ripple of desperate hope through the vessel. It's not a bustling port or a settled island. It's a small, green smudge on the horizon, an uninhabited cay, one of the thousands of tiny, forgotten islands sprinkled across the Caribbean. For a trading vessel or a naval ship, this island would be an obstacle to be avoided. For you, it is paradise. The captain decides to drop anchor in his sheltered cove. The goal is not to bury treasure. The goal is a treasure far more valuable: fresh water and food. You are part of the shore party, and the moment your feet touch the solid, sandy beach, the sensation is so overwhelming you almost fall to your knees. After months of the constant, rolling motion of the ship, the stillness of the ground feels alien and profound. The shore party immediately splits up with different objectives. The first and most critical mission is to find fresh water. The ship's casks are nearly empty, and what's left is a foul, green sludge, led by the quartermaster. A group of men, armed with shovels and barrels, heads inland, following the terrain, looking for signs of a spring or a stream. Finding a source of clean, running water is the highest priority. If they can't find one, they will have to dig a seep well near the beach, a deep hole in the sand that will slowly fill with brackish, sand-filtered seawater. It's better than nothing, but far from ideal. Your group has a different mission: foraging. You are to find anything at all, that is edible. You push your way into the dense, humid jungle of the island's interior. The air is thick with the smell of damp earth, decaying leaves, and wild blossoms. It's a sensory overload after the sterile, salty air of the sea. You are not trained botanists. Your search is a clumsy, dangerous process of trial and error. You are looking for things you recognize: coconut palms, banana trees, perhaps wild yams or other edible roots. The pirates' knowledge of local flora and fauna was oft unsurprisingly extensive, learned from castaways, native peoples, and their own hard-won experience. You spot a flash of reed in the green canopy. It's a fruit you don't recognize. Is it edible? Is it poisonous? This was a constant and deadly danger for foraging sailors. An older sailor in your group, a man who claims to have been shipwrecked for a year, sniffs the fruit, breaks it open, and cautiously touches a tiny piece to his tongue. He waits a minute, then spits it out. Tastes like trouble. He grunts. Then you move on. This crude method of testing potential foods was common, but tragically unreliable. A plant that tastes fine might still contain slow-acting toxins. Here's a little-known fact about pirate foraging. They would often watch the local animals. If they saw birds or monkeys eating a particular fruit, they would deem it safe for human consumption. It was a simple, ecological rule of thumb that, while not foolproof, was certainly better than blind guesswork. After an hour of searching, you hit the jackpot. A small grove of coconut trees. The crew works together to bring them down. You hack one open with your cutlass and drink the water inside. It's the most delicious thing you've ever tasted. Cool, slightly sweet, and utterly pure. It's a sacrament. Then you eat the white meat, which is rich and fatty. It's real, life-giving food, wrested from the wild. The historical debate here concerns the myth of the tropical paradise. Popular culture often portrays these Caribbean islands as lush, bountiful Edens, overflowing with easily obtainable food. The reality, historians argue, was often much harsher. Many of these small caves were arid and barren, with little more than scrub brush and brackish water. The ones that were lush were also filled with dangers: venomous snakes, poisonous plants, and swarms of insects. Foraging was hard, often unruffling work. The image of pirates lounging on a beach, effortlessly feasting on tropical fruits, is largely a fantasy. Every coconut was a victory earned through sweat undressed. While your party gathers coconuts, another group is hunting. They are stalking the island's wild pigs, descendants of animals left behind by Spanish settlers centuries ago, or hunting for large iguanas, whose meat was known as treat chicken. The crack of a musket shot echoes through the jungle, a sign of success. By the end of the day, the shore party returns to the beach, bearing the fruits of their labor. There are barrels of fresh water, mounds of coconuts, a few slaughtered wild pigs, and bunches of wild bananas. It's a magnificent haul. That night, you have a feast on the beach, a bonfire roaring against the darkness. You roast the pork on makeshift spits, the meat seasoned with wild herbs you found. You drink the fresh water without a hint of rum to mask its taste. You feel the land's solid presence beneath you. You are part of the earth again. This stop is more than just a resupply mission. It's a psychological reset. It's a reminder that a world exists beyond the rotting confines of the ship. It renews your hope and your health. As you lie on the warm sand, full and contented, you know this paradise is temporary. Tomorrow, you will refill the casks, load the new provisions, and return to your wooden prison on the sea. But for tonight, you are saved. You have come ashore, and for a brief, precious moment, you are home. The euphoria of the island feast fades as you set sail once more. The fresh pork is gone, the coconuts have been devoured, and the newly filled water casks are already beginning to acquire their familiar swampy taste. You are back in the grim reality of the ship, a reality made even more stark by the recent memory of abundance. The hunger returns, and with it, a new level of desperation. Your eyes start to wander to the other inhabitants of the ship, the ones that aren't part of the official crew. Your ship, like every wooden vessel of the era, has a second, shadow crew, a thriving population of rats. They are everywhere. You hear them at night, their tiny claws scratching inside the walls of the hull. You see them in the hold, scurrying over the barrels, their dark shapes darting in the gloom of your lantern light. They are a constant, unwelcome presence. They are pests. They chew through ropes, spoil grain, and are seen as a symbol of filth and decay. For the first few months of the voyage, you viewed them with nothing but disgust, kicking at them whenever they crossed your path. But now, your perspective has shifted. Your stomach crumbles with a deep, unsatisfied ache. The salt beef is more punishing than nourishing, and the weevils in the hardtack are no longer a novelty, just a gritty annoyance. You look at a fat, sleek rat scurrying along a beam, and a new thought enters your mind, a thought that would have horrified you a few months ago. that rat is made of meat. You were not the first to have this thought. For sailors on the brink of starvation, the ship's rats transformed from vermin into a viable food source. It was an act of pure desperation, a sign that the official rations had become truly unbearable or were running dangerously low. Catching them was a challenge. Rats are smart, fast, then wary. The crew would organize hunts, setting crude traps or cornering them in the hold with clubs and knives. It was a grim, bloody sport, played out in the dark, cramped spaces below deck. Once caught, the rats were prepared for the pot. Slushy Pete, ever the pragmatist, would skin them and gut them just like any other small animal. They were usually thrown into the communal stew, their small, stringy bodies adding a bit of texture and a faint, gum-eye flavor to the usual gray mush. Sometimes, if a man was particularly successful in his hunt, he might roast his catch over the firebox, a prided, savory-smelling feast that would be the envy of the crew. Here's a curious, and somewhat disgusting, tidbit about the practice of eating rats at sea. Experienced sailors had a preference. They would only eat the rats from the lower hold, the ones that had been feasting on the ship's stored grain and biscuits. They would avoid the rats from the upper decks, which were known to feed on the filth from the bilge and other refuse. They were, in their own desperate way, connoisseurs of roasted vermin, distinguishing between the clean grain-fed rats and the dirty bilge drinkers. The idea of eating a rat is repulsive to your modern sensibilities, and it was to the 18th century sailor as well, at least at first. But a starving body has a way of overriding cultural taboos. Protein is protein. Calories are calories. When the choice is between eating a rat or succumbing to the weakness of starvation, the choice becomes surprisingly clear. The historical debate on this topic isn't about whether sailors ate rats. They absolutely did. The journals of castaways and the logs of long, unfortunate voyages are full of references to it. The debate is about how common it was, particularly on pirate ships. Was it a last resort, a sign of a failed voyage, or was it a more routine, if unappetizing, supplement to the diet? Some historians argue that for pirates, whose voyages were often unpredictable and whose provisioning was haphazard, rat hunting might have been a fairly regular occurrence, a normal part of life in the famine periods of their feast or famine cycle. Others maintain it was always a sign of deep desperation, a line that was only crossed when the salted meat had become completely putrid or the biscuits had run out entirely. One evening, a fellow sailor offers you a piece of meat from a small, charred creature he has just pulled from the fire. It's dark, and you can't see it clearly. You know what it is. Part of you recoils in horror. But the smell of roasted meat, any roasted meat, is overpowering. Your hunger makes the decision for you. You take it and chew. The meat is tough, stringy, and has a strong, slightly sweet, gum-eye taste. It's not pleasant, but it's not repulsive either. It's just meat. It's warm. It's protein. And it silences the gnawing ache in your stomach for a little while. You have crossed another line. You came on this ship seeking fortune and freedom. You have eaten insects. You have consumed slime. You have drunk a living swamp. And now you have eaten a rat. Each of these acts has chipped away a little piece of the person you used to be. The person who lived on land and took fresh, clean food for granted. You are becoming a creature of the sea, a creature of the ship. Your morality is being replaced by a simple, brutal calculus of survival. You look at the world around you not in terms of good or bad, clean or dirty, but in terms of edible or inedible, and you are beginning to realize, with a cold sense of dread that the category of edible is expanding every single day. The rats have become scarce. The wily ones have learned to hide, and the slow ones have already ended up in the stew pot. The hunting is no longer worth the effort. The barrels are almost empty. The daily ration of hardtack is now down to half a biscuit a day. The salted meat is long gone. Starvation is no longer a looming threat. It is a present-day reality. The gnawing hunger in your belly is a constant. Dull fire. Your body, deprived of calories, begins to consume itself. You become gaunt. Your skin stretched tight over your cheekbones. Your clothes hang loosely on your shrinking frame. The crew is a collection of walking skeletons, moving with a slow, deliberate economy of motion, conserving every last scrap of energy. This is when you enter the final, desperate stage of the pirate diet. Before the ultimate taboo, you begin to look at inedible objects and wonder if they can be made edible. Your eyes fall upon the leather goods on the ship, your own belt, your shoes, the thick, stiff leather straps used in the ship's rigging. It's a desperate, insane thought, but it takes root in the barren landscape of your hunger. This was a unique act of madness. It's a historically documented survival technique used by starving sailors, soldiers, and explorers for centuries. The most famous account comes from the chronicles of Antonio Pigafetta, who sailed with Ferdinand Magellan on his circumnavigation of the globe. He described how the starving crew resorted to eating the leather protectors on the ship's rigging. The process of making leather edible is a testament to the depths of human desperation. You take a piece of leather, let's say, an old, cracked shoe sole. It's hard, dry, and smells of old sweat and tar. You can't just chew on it. It would be like chewing on a piece of wood. The first step is to soften it. You and your crewmates cut the leather into strips and soak them in seawater for days. This helps to soften the tough, and hide and leach out some of the foul-tasting chemicals used in the tanning process. After soaking, the leather strips are still and eatable enough. The next step is to boil them. You put the leather strips into the cauldron with a bit of water and boil them for hours, sometimes for an entire day. The goal is not to cook the leather in a traditional sense, but to break down the tough collagen fibers and turn them into a gelatinous substance. As it boils, the leather slowly loses its structure, dissolving into a thick, gluey, foul-smelling soup. The result is a substance that sailors grimly called leather soup. It's a thick, sticky, brownish glop that clings to the spoon. The smell is vile, a combination of boiled animal hide and old shoes. The taste is even worse. It's a bland, vaguely savory flavor, like licking an old wallet, with an underlying chemical bitterness. The texture is the most challenging part. It's a thick, gelatinous slime that coats your mouth. But here is the crucial, tragic fact about this practice. While it could fill your stomach and give you the psychological sensation of having eaten, the nutritional value was almost zero. The tanning process, which preserves leather, fundamentally alters the proteins, making them largely indigestible to humans. You could swallow a gallon of this leather gruel, and your body would absorb very few, if any, useful calories. It was a placebo, a trick you played on your own starving mind. The historical debate among scholars on this point is a subtle one. Did sailors who resorted to eating leather know it was nutritionally useless, or did they genuinely believe it was providing them with some sustenance? The consensus is that they likely didn't understand the chemistry, but they knew from experience that men who ate leather still wasted away and died. However, in the throes of starvation, the psychological benefit of putting something, anything, warm into your stomach could be powerful. It could provide the mental fortitude to survive one more day, to hold on to the slimmest sliver of hope. It was a ritual of survival, even if it was a biological lie. You spoon the hot, viscous leather soup into your mouth. It's the most disgusting thing you have ever tasted. A new low in a long journey of culinary horrors. It's worse than the weevils, worse than the slime on the meat, worse even than the rat. Those things were, at least, food. This is something else. This is an object, a piece of equipment that you have tortured into the semblance of a meal. You force it down, your gag reflex fighting with every swallow. The hot glue slides into your stomach, filling the aching void. It doesn't satisfy your hunger, but it quiets it for a little while. It gives you something to do, a process to focus on other than the slow, inexorable process of your own starvation. You look around at the other men, their skeletal faces illuminated by the dim lantern light, all silently spooning the same vile concoction into their mouths. There is no conversation. There is no hope. There is only the shared, desperate act of pretending to eat. You have reached the bottom of the barrel, scraped it clean, and have now begun to consume the barrel itself. You are eating your own shoes, and you know, with a terrifying clarity, that there is only one unthinkable source of food left on this ship. The leather soup is gone. The last of the candles, made from tallow, have been eaten. The ship is adrift, a ghost ship crewed by ghosts. You are trapped in the most feared place on Earth for a sailor, the doldrums. It's a region near the equator where the prevailing trade winds die out. The sea, which is usually a landscape of motion and energy, becomes a flat, glassy, metallic surface, stretching to the horizon in all directions. The sun is a merciless, white-hot eye in a pale, cloudless sky. It beats down on the deck, making the tar bubble in the seams of the planks. The heat is a physical presence, a suffocating blanket that drains the last of your strength. The sails hang limp and useless. The ship doesn't move. It just sits there, a speck of human misery in a vast, indifferent wilderness of sea and sky. Days turn into a week. Then, too, time loses its meaning. There is only the relentless cycle of the burning sun and the brief, sweltering darkness of night. All the desperate measures have been exhausted. The reds are gone. The leather has been boiled. The last of the foul water in the casks has been drunk. Now, there is nothing. The hunger is no longer a fire in your belly. It's a cold, hollow emptiness that has consumed your entire being. Your thoughts are slow and syrupy. Your vision blurs at the edges. Thirst is a constant, raging agony. Your tongue is swollen. Your throat is like sandpaper. The crew is scattered around the deck, too weak to move. They lie in the slivers of shade cast by the mast and the rails, their skeletal bodies still, their eyes vacant. The only sound is the gentle, maddening slap with the water against the hull and the faint, dry rasp of men struggling to breathe. This is the ultimate nightmare for any voyage. Being becalmed was a death sentence. Without wind, you killed and traveled to find food or water. You killed and hunt for other ships. You were simply a prisoner of the weather, waiting to be executed by the sun. The accounts of ships trapped in the doldrums are among the most harrowing in all of maritime history. They speak of a descent into a specific kind of madness, born of heat, thirst, and hopelessness. Men would hallucinate, seeing phantom islands or rain clouds on the horizon. They would stare at the glassy sea for hours, their minds eroded by the sheer, unchanging emptiness of it all. Here's a small, grim detail about the horrors of being becalmed. The ship itself becomes a solar oven. The air below deck becomes so hot and stagnant that it's unbreathable. The crew is forced to stay on the exposed upper deck, where the sun bakes them without mercy. But the deck planks, heated by the sun, become too hot to touch. The men are trapped between the suffocating heat below and the searing heat above. You lie on the deck, your mind drifting in and out of consciousness. You dream of water, not just drinking it, but the feeling of it. You dream of rain on your face, of jumping into a cool river. These dreams are so vivid that waking up to the hot, dry reality is a fresh form of torture every time. The social structure of the crew has completely dissolved. The captain is just another starving man. The pirate code is a meaningless relic of a former life. There is no authority, no camaraderie. There is only individual suffering. Each man is an island of misery. The historical question that hangs over these scenarios is one of leadership. In such an extreme situation, what could a captain or a quartermaster do? The answer, most historians agree, is very little. They were as helpless as the lowest cabin boy. Their authority, which was based on their ability to lead the crew to success and plunder, evaporated when success became impossible. Some accounts tell of captains who tried to maintain morale with false hope or strict discipline, but these efforts almost always failed. The primal, biological reality of starvation and thirst trumped all forms of social order. It was the ultimate equalizer. As another day bleeds into another night, a new sound begins to be heard on the ship. It's a low murmur, a quiet, desperate conversation happening between a few of the men who still have the strength to speak. They are discussing the custom of the sea. It's a euphemism, a polite, traditional term for the most terrible choice that sailors could face. When all hope was lost, when death was a certainty, the custom of the sea offered one last, horrifying path to survival for the few at the expense of the one. You hear the words "lots must be drawn." You know what it means. They are talking about a lottery where the winner gets to live, and the loser becomes the final meal. The silence of the doldrums is broken by the chilling quiet of this new idea. The despair, which was once a passive, quiet thing, is about to be replaced by an active, organized horror. You look at the skeletal figures of your crewmates, men you have fought alongside, men you have shared stories with, and for the first time, you see them not as comrades, but as competition, as potential sustenance. The ultimate taboo is about to be broken, and the becalmed sea will be its silent witness. The discussion, which began as a desperate whisper, has now become the unspoken reality on the ship. The custom of the sea. It hangs in the hot, stagnant air. The horrifying, yet logical, conclusion to your predicament. The crew, or what's left of it, must make a choice. To die together of thirst and starvation, or for one to be sacrificed so that the others might have a chance to live. This was not a concept invented by pirates. It was a grim, unwritten law of the sea, a last resort protocol that had been practiced by desperate sailors from many nations for centuries. When a crew was beyond all hope of rescue, they would resort to what was known as survival cannibalism. The process was oft unchillingly formal and democratic, in a way that twisted the pirates' own egalitarian ideals into a grotesque parody. It was the chaotic, violent free-for-all that would waste precious energy. Instead, it was a ritual. The first step was to determine who the victim would be. The most common method was drawing lots. The captain or quartermaster would prepare the lots, perhaps by taking several pieces of paper or wood shavings, one of them marked They would be placed in a hat, and each of the survivors would draw one. The man who drew the marked lot was the chosen one. You watch as the men, with the last of their strength, gather in a circle on the deck. The quartermaster, his face a hollow mask of sun-cracked skin and bone, holds out a tattered hat. You reach in, your hand trembling, and pull out a small splinter of wood. It is unmarked. A wave of relief so profound it almost makes you faint washes over you. You are safe. For now. But then you look at the man next to you. He slowly uncurls his fist. In his palm is a splinter with a dark charcoal mark on it. He is a young man named Thomas. A boy you shared a joke with what feels like a lifetime ago. He doesn't scream or fight. There is no energy for that. He just stares at the marked splinter. A look of blank, hollow acceptance in his eyes. He has lost the lottery. The historical records of these events, often taken from the harrowing testimonies of the survivors, are remarkably consistent in their descriptions. The loser of the lottery was typically expected to accept his fate with a certain stoicism. He was sometimes given a last drink of rum, if any remained, or a few moments to say a prayer. Then, the execution was carried out, often by the ship's cook or surgeon, who had the tools and the anatomical knowledge to do the job as efficiently as possible. This brings us to a grim and lesser-known aspect of the custom. The method to conserve the precious blood, which would be drunk to combat thirst. The victim was often dispatched not with a cutlass, but by a swift blow or by strangulation. Every part of the body that could provide sustenance was then carefully harvested. It was a butchery born of the most extreme necessity. The act itself was surrounded by a strange sort of psychological distancing. The survivors would often speak of it in detached, clinical terms. They were not murdering their friend. They were following the custom of the sea. The victim was no longer a person. He was the provisions. This linguistic shift was a vital coping mechanism, allowing them to perform an unthinkable act without completely shattering their own sanity. The debate among historians and legal scholars about the custom of the sea is intense. Was it ever legally justifiable? In the 19th century, the famous case of R.V. Dudley and Stevens tested this very question. Two shipwrecked sailors killed and died, a cabin boy to survive and were rescued. When they returned to England, they were put on trial for murder. They argued that they had no choice, that it was a necessity. The court, in a landmark ruling, convicted them of murder, establishing the principle that necessity is not a defense for taking an innocent life. However, public opinion was largely on the side of the sailors, and their death sentences were commuted to a short prison term. This case highlights the deep moral and ethical conflict at the heart of survival cannibalism. Was it a barbaric crime or a tragic, understandable act of survival? The law said one thing, but the public, and perhaps the pirates themselves, felt another. You turn away, unable to watch. You are racked with a storm of emotions, the profound guilt at your own survival, the horror of what is about to happen, and the shameful, undeniable biological urge that knows this act is your only hope. Later, you are given your share. It is a small piece of roasted meat. It looks like any other meat. It has been cooked by the same man, over the same firebox, as all your other meals. But you know what it is. To eat it is to cross the final, ultimate boundary of humanity. To refuse it is to die. You close your eyes. You think of nothing. You lift the piece to your mouth, and you eat. It is a moment that will be seared into your soul forever. It is the price of survival. You have lived, but you have lost a part of yourself that you can never get back. You are no longer just a pirate, a thief, A sailor. You are a survivor of the custom of the sea. A man who has consumed his own kind to see another sunrise. And you know that if the wind does not come soon, another lottery will have to be drawn. By some miracle, the wind does return. A breeze, then a steady gust, fills the sails, and the ship, your floating charnel house, begins to move again. You are rescued from the brink, but you are not the same. The memory of what happened in the doldrums is a silent, ghostly passenger on the ship. A few days later, you manage to limp into a friendly port, a place like Tortuga or a hidden cove in Hispaniola. Stepping onto solid ground is a disorienting experience. You are weak, emaciated, and haunted, but the port is a riot of life. The air is filled with the smells of wood smoke, roasting meat, fresh baked bread, and spilled rum. It's the smell of abundance, a world away from the sterile, stinking confines of your ship. With your small share of a previous prize, you have a few coins in your pocket. You make your way to a tavern, a noisy, crowded place full of sailors and merchants. And here, you get to experience what food is like for other people in this same era. The contrast is so staggering it makes you dizzy. You sit at a rough wooden table and order a meal. A real meal. What arrives is a revelation. It's a plate, an actual ceramic plate, piled high with food. There's a thick slice of roasted wild boar, its skin crackling and crisp. There's a scoop of mashed yams, bright orange and sweet. There are stewed black beans with onions and peppers, and a thick slice of bread that is soft and warm from the oven. You eat slowly, deliberately. Each bite is an explosion of flavor and texture, the tenderness of the meat, the sweetness of the yams, the savory spice of the beans. It's a symphony your palate had completely forgotten. This isn't just sustenance. It's a craft. Someone, a cook who cared, has taken these ingredients and combined them to create pleasure. It's a concept that feels alien and luxurious. This is the food of common people on land, not even the wealthy. But let's take a moment to imagine what a truly rich person, a colonial governor or a wealthy plantation owner, would be eating at this very same time. Their table would be a spectacle of conspicuous consumption, designed to display their wealth and power. Their feast might begin with turtle soup, a clear, delicate broth, a world away from the hacked-up turtles you had at sea. Then would come the fish course, perhaps red snapper baked in a crust of salt and herbs. The main event would be a whole roasted pig, or perhaps a young goat, stuffed with spices and fruits. Surrounding the centerpiece would be a dozen side dishes, roasted plantains, rice pilaf cooked with raisins and almonds, salads of fresh greens drizzled with olive oil, and pepper pots, rich, spicy stews of West African origin, thick with vegetables and various meats. For dessert, there would be custards, jellies made with imported gelatin, and great cakes laden with sugar, spices, and dried fruit, all washed down with expensive, imported European wines. Here's a small, curious detail about wealthy dining in this era. Sugar was the ultimate status symbol. It was incredibly expensive, a luxury imported from the sugar cane plantations which, ironically, were the source of the cheap molasses used to make your rum. Wealthy hosts would show off by having elaborate sugar sculptures as centerpiece on their tables. They would also put sugar in everything, not just desserts, but in savory meat and vegetable dishes too. A heavily sweetened dish was a sign of high status, as use it in your humble tavern, eating your simple, delicious meal. The gap between your world and theirs seems impossibly wide. They are living on a different planet, Their food is about art, status, and pleasure. Your food has been about one thing and one thing only: delaying death. The historical debate here concerns the trickle-down effect of culinary culture. Did the elaborate cuisine of the rich influence the diet of the common person or the pirate at all? To some extent, yes. Pirates, when they captured a wealthy ship, would have a brief, explosive encounter with these luxury goods. They would gorge on the fine wines, the spices, the sugar. The famous pirate dish, samanduri, was a chaotic imitation of a fashionable European salad. But for the most part, historians agree that the two culinary worlds were entirely separate. The daily diet of a pirate was dictated by the harsh realities of preservation and logistics, not by fashion or taste. It was a cuisine of pure function, completely detached from the culinary arts developing on land. You finish your meal, scraping the plate clean. You feel a profound sense of satisfaction, but also a strange sort of alienation. You are no longer one of them. These people of the land. You have seen behind the curtain. You know the dark, disgusting truth of what it takes to survive when the bounty of the land is gone. You look at the half-eaten loaf of bread on the table next to you. A few weeks ago, you would have killed for it. Now, it's just a leftover. The casual abundance of the shore feels wasteful, almost obscene. You have returned to civilization, but you carry the wilderness of the sea inside you. You can eat their food, that you can never fully rejoin their world. You know too much about the darkness that lies on the other side of a full pantry. You've spent a few days in port, eating real food and trying to feel human again. The memory of the becalmed ship is a nightmare you're trying to scrub from your mind. In the tavern, you strike up a conversation with a man who carries himself differently. H.E.S. not a pirate. His clothes are worn but uniform, and there's a disciplined, weary look in his eye. H.E.S. a sailor from a British Royal Navy warship that's in port for repairs. Out of a morbid curiosity, you ask him about the food. You want to know, was it just you? Was it just the chaotic, hand-to-mouth life of a pirate that led to such misery? Or was everyone at sea suffering the same fate? The naval sailor, whose name is Davies, lets out a short, bitter laugh. You think we eat like kings? He asks. He proceeds to describe his diet, and you listen with a growing sense of familiarity. The foundation of his meals is the same unholy trinity you know so well: hardtack, salted meat, and water. The Royal Navy, he explains, had a highly regulated and standardized system of provisions. Everything was measured and accounted for. On paper, it sounded organized, even generous. The official weekly ration for a sailor in the early 18th century included about a pound of biscuit and a gallon of beer per day, plus several pounds of salt beef and pork, and some peas and oatmeal distributed throughout the week. But the reality on board was a different story. The hardtack was, of course, teeming with weevils. Davies calls them biscuit bugs and confirms your own grim wisdom. We tap, they crawl, we eat, he says with a shrug. The salted beef was just as tough and foul as your own salt horse. He tells you a common naval joke. A sailor carved a button from a piece of boiled beef, lost it, and found it 2 years later in a rat's nest. Not a damn bit worse for wear. The water was the same. It was stored in casks. It went green. It stank. The Navy's solution was the same as the pirates. Mask it. Their daily ration of beer served this purpose at the beginning of a voyage. When the beer went sour, they switched to the daily rum ration, which they, of course, called grog. So, on a fundamental level, the diet was identical. The same lack of refrigeration and reliance on preservation created the same miserable food. However, Davies reveals a few key differences. The first difference was consistency. The Navy, for all its flaws, was a massive organization with a supply chain. Their provisions were terrible, but they were generally reliable. A naval ship was less likely to run out of food completely, unless it was on a very long, exploratory voyage. They didn't live the same feast or famine lifestyle as pirates. Theirs was a more predictable, monotonous famine all the time. A small, quirky detail of the naval diet was the obsession with certain foods believed to have anti-score but icy properties. Even before the science was understood, the official rations included oatmeal and dried peas. These were made into mushy, bland porridges. While they did provide some calories and fiber, they had virtually no vitamin C and did nothing to prevent scurvy. The Navy was trying to provide a balanced diet, but they were working with flawed science. It was a well-intentioned failure. The biggest difference, however, was the corruption. The system for supplying the Navy was notoriously corrupt. The contractors who won the bids to supply the fleet were infamous for cutting corners. They would provide the cheapest, oldest, and poorest quality goods, often bribing the officials who were meant to inspect them. The barrels of meat might be underweight, filled with more salt than beef. The flour for the biscuits would be low grade, already infested with insect eggs, while a pirate crew might steal bad food. A naval crew had bad food officially issued to them by their own government. The historical debate here is a fascinating one. Who actually ate better, a pirate or a naval sailor? On one hand, the naval sailor had more reliable, if consistently terrible, rations. They were less likely to face outright starvation. On the other hand, the pirate, through plunder, had more frequent access to sudden windfalls of fresh, high-quality food and fine liquor. A pirate crew that was successful could enjoy a few days or weeks of eating like lords, a luxury the average naval sailor would never experience. The consensus among many historians is that, over the course of a year, a successful pirate probably had a more varied and, at times, far more pleasant and nutritious diet than his counterpart in the King's Navy. The pirate's life was a high-stakes gamble, and that gamble extended to his dinner plate. You and Davies, the naval sailor, find a strange sort of common ground. You are on opposite sides of the law, mortal enemies on the high seas, but you are brothers in suffering, united by the shared experience of weevils and salt horse. You both know the misery of scurvy, the foul taste of stagnant water, the soul-crushing monotony of a preserved diet. You buy him another rum. It's a moment of bizarre camaraderie. You realize that the struggle for decent food at sea transcended allegiance. It was a universal battle fought by every man who left the shore behind, whether he sailed under the black flag or the Union Jack. The conversation leaves you with a profound sense of irony. You joined the pirates to escape the rigid, oppressive system of the Navy and the merchant service. You sought freedom, and yet, when it came to the most fundamental aspect of survival, you ended up in the exact same leaky, disgusting boat. The sea, in its infinite cruelty, starved everyone with a grim and perfect equality. Your time in port has been a period of physical recovery. You've eaten fresh food. Your gums have healed. The ghostly wounds of scurvy have begun to fade, and you've even put a little weight back on your skeletal frame. But as you prepare to ship out again, you realize that while your body has started to mend, your mind is a different story. The diet of the past year has left a permanent scar on your psyche. You notice it in small ways. When you eat fast, defensively, as if someone might snatch the food away. You can't bear to see food wasted. You feel a pang of genuine anxiety when you see someone leave a half-eaten piece of bread on their plate. You find yourself hoarding food, stashing a piece of fruit or a biscuit in your pocket for later, even though you know your next meal is only hours away. These are the reflexes of a starved man, instincts that are hard to unlearn. But the psychological impact goes deeper than just your relationship with food. You start to understand how the pirate diet shaped the very culture and temperament of the men you sail with. Think about the nature of your existence. It's a life lived in a constant state of physical discomfort and stress. The food doesn't just taste bad. It makes you feel bad. The high-salt diet likely lead to chronic dehydration and hypertension. The lack of essential nutrients cause profound fatigue, depression, and irritability. The constant pain of scurvy, toothaches, and aching joints created a baseline of misery. You are living inside a body that is constantly screaming at you. This constant physical distress helps to explain the notoriously short tempers and volatility of pirate crews. When you are in constant pain and feel perpetually unwell, a small annoyance can feel like a major assault. A perceived slight can quickly escalate into a knife fight. The famous pirate rage wasn't just a matter of a lawless personality. It was fueled by a body chemistry that was perpetually out of balance, a mind that was never allowed a moment of physical peace. This brings us to a little-known concept in psychology: the link between diet and decision-making. Modern studies have shown that poor nutrition can impair cognitive function, shorten attention spans, and lead to more impulsive, risk-seeking behavior. Now, apply that to a pirate. Your diet is systematically robbing your brain of the nutrients it needs to think clearly. This might explain the pirate's legendary live for today, for tomorrow we swing attitude. Their worldview was incredibly short-sighted. When your body is falling apart and your next meal is uncertain, long-term planning becomes an abstract, pointless exercise. The only thing that matters is the immediate gratification of the next prize. This is why pirates, upon capturing a vast fortune, would often squander it in a few weeks of epic debauchery in port. They weren't investing in their retirement. They were desperately grabbing at a moment of intense, vibrant life to offset the long periods of slow, grinding death at sea. Their diet programmed them for short-term thinking. The historical debate here explores the nature versus nurture of the pirate identity. Were pirates inherently reckless, violent, and short-sighted men who were drawn to the life? Or did the life itself, particularly the brutalizing physical conditions dictated by their diet, forge them into these characters? Many modern historians argue for the latter. They suggest that we can't understand the pirate personality without understanding the pirate's physical reality. The swaggering, aggressive pirate of popular culture can be seen as a direct product of a man whose gums were rotting, whose joints ached, and whose stomach was either empty or filled with indigestible filth. You see this in your own crewmates. They are not simply evil men. They are men who have been brutalized by their environment. Their capacity for joy is immense and explosive, but so is their capacity for violence. Their loyalty to each other is fierce, forged in shared suffering, but their trust in the future is non-existent. You have become one of them. You find your own patience wearing thin. Your outlook on life has become cynical and pragmatic. You no longer believe in grand plans or distant rewards. You believe in the certainty of the next meal, the next bottle of rum, the next prize, Everything else is just a fantasy. Your diet has done more than just assault your body. It has rewired your brain. It has taught you that life is pain, punctuated by brief, frantic moments of pleasure. It has taught you that the world is a hostile place where you must snatch what you can. While you can, it has stripped away the hopeful, naive young man you once were and replaced him with a hardened survivor. As you stand on the deck of the ship, watching the port recede, you feel a sense of grim resignation. You are heading back into the world of weevils and salt horse. You know what it will do to your body. But now, with a chilling clarity, you also know what it will do to your soul. It will continue the slow, steady work of turning you into a pirate. Not just in occupation, but in your very essence. The ship is yours now. Not literally. Of course, you're not the captain, but in a deeper sense, you have finally, fully arrived. The sea, the creaking wood, the swaying hammock, the grim routine. It is all as familiar to you now as the village you grew up in. You are the veteran, an old hand, new recruits, fresh from the shore with dreams of gold in their eyes, now look to you for guidance. You find yourself teaching them the grim wisdom you once had to learn. You show them how to tap the hardtack to see if the weevils are still alive. You advise them to eat in the dark. You explain that the green slime in the water is normal. You share these lessons with a detached, weary air, the same way Silas, the man with the missing fingers, once taught you. You have completed the circle. You've seen it all. You've survived the slow decay of scurvy and the miraculous reprieve of a captured prize. You've hunted turtles, foraged on islands, and eaten things you swore you never would. You have endured the hell of the doldrums and faced the ultimate taboo that followed. Nothing the sea can throw at you, nothing the cook can pull from a barrel, can't really shock you anymore. One evening, you're on watch, staring out at the familiar, endless expanse of the ocean under a canopy of brilliant stars. You are chewing on a piece of soaked hardtack. You obsessively notice the soft, squishy texture of a few weevils mixed in with the gritty paste. You don't flinch. You don't even notice. Really, it's just food. This moment of non-reaction is, in its own way, the final stage of your journey. You have achieved a state of complete and total acceptance. The revulsion is gone, replaced by a profound, unshakable pragmatism. This is what it takes to live this life, and you have accepted the terms. You think back to that first day in Nassau, watching the provisions being loaded, full of a naive excitement about the freedom and fortune that awaited you. You want to laugh at that boy. What did he know of freedom? He was a slave to 1,000 small comforts. The expectation of a soft bed, a clean drink of water, a pleasant-tasting meal. You, on the other hand, are truly free. You are free from the tyranny of taste. You are free from the expectation of comfort. You have been stripped down to the bare, the essential core of survival, and you have found that you can endure. There is a strange, hard-won power in that knowledge. Abas are fantasy, a peculiar form of nostalgia, sometimes crosses your mind. You find yourself dreaming not of a grand feast, but of the simplest meal from your past. You dream of your mother's kitchen. You can smell the scent of baking bread, a real loaf, yeasty and warm. You can picture a simple bowl of vegetable soup, with fresh carrots and potatoes. You can taste a cool glass of milk. This is the ultimate irony. After all the chaos, the plunder, the rum, and the adventure, the treasure you truly covet is a memory of the most basic, humble nourishment. It's the one thing you can't steal, the one thing you can't find in a Spanish galleon. It's a treasure that only exists in your mind. A quiet dream of a life you left behind. The historical debate here is a philosophical one. What was the ultimate legacy of this diet? Did it simply create a generation of brutal, unhealthy men? Or did it, in some strange way, distill a certain kind of human resilience? The extreme hardship of the pirate diet was a crucible. It destroyed many men, driving them to madness, disease, and death. But the ones who survived were forced to develop a mental and physical toughness that is almost unimaginable to us today. They learned to separate their spirit from the suffering of their body. They were living proof that a human being can endure almost anything if the will to live is strong enough. You finish your biscuit and wash it down with a swig of grog. The familiar taste, once so foul, is now almost comforting. It is the taste of your life. You look out at the dark water, and you feel a sense of peace. You are a survivor. You have been through the worst the world has to offer, and you are still here. You have been broken and remade by this life, by this food. You are no longer the man who stepped onto this ship, but you are, finally and completely, yourself, a pirate, a creature of the sea, at home in the heart of the long, dark, hungry night. The gentle rocking of the ship has become a cradle now, a slow, steady rhythm that has seeped into your bones over countless nights. The stories of hardtack and salt beef, of scurvy and starvation, they begin to fade, their sharp edges softening as you drift closer to the shore of sleep. The voices on the deck are muted, distant murmurs, like the gentle lapping of waves against a quiet beach. The salty, foul reality of that life dissolves into the soft, forgiving haze of a dream. You are no longer on the ship. You are in a quiet kitchen, bathed in the warm, yellow light of a candle. The air doesn't smell of tar and rot, but of baking bread and simmering herbs. A bowl of simple, steaming soup sits on a wooden table before you. There are no weevils, no slime, only the pure, honest nourishment of the land. You lift the spoon, and the warmth of it fills you, a deep and profound comfort that settles all the old aches. The long voyage is over. You are home. You are safe. You are at peace. Let the gentle tide of the stream carry you now, pulling you out into the calm, quiet, deep waters of a good night's sleep. Rest now. You've earned it.